Howdy, folks, and welcome in to the SMITE Challenger Circuit. It's week 1, day 3, rounding out SMITE action. We find ourselves in North America. Dimes here. I got you for play-by-play. My good pal Kaizo joining me, taking things care of on the analysis side. Kaizo, it's week 1, finishing out the SCC for this week. This is a sprint, not a marathon. I'm talking 5 weeks in this phase before relegations and the top 2 teams qualify for SMITE Masters. I mean, teams have to get going right off the bat.
Yeah, there is no time to really mess around here. We're pretty much looking at these teams jumping in head first and just seeing what's working already. You don't really get to mosey your way around and kind of try out a couple of different things. If you don't have your strategy lined up in week 1, you're already at a bit of a disadvantage here. I like the term sprint that you use there because that is kind of what it feels like. If you aren't jumping in, running full speed, you very well could get left behind.
Well, like I mentioned, the top 2 teams at the end of this phase qualify for SMITE Masters. The bottom 2 teams head to the SOC side for a potential shot to get relegated out of the circuit. And when I'm talking about 2 teams that like to get going, these are 2 teams that know how to inject a shot of adrenaline into their games. It's the Wardens and it's the Sages, and we're headed to picks and bans.
And once we go into picks and bans here, Dimes, there are a couple of things that I want to bring up because we've been seeing so much of this Marty chorus over the last several days of SPL and SCC action. We just got done watching the Polar Bear Mike team trying to play in and around this character. And Gormizer brought up a very important point on the desk during that set. This is a character we've been seeing, I think, 7 times so far over the last several days, and it's only got about a 20% win rate. And it's got no wins at all when it's first picked overall, which is more often than not where we end up seeing this pick going. And I want to be very clear, I don't think that's any fault of the character. I think that Marty is a very good god, but I think that maybe some adjustments to the prioritization here, we can see it taken away in the ban phase this time around. I do think it's a good god, but very well maybe time to potentially put that favor elsewhere.
Well, taking a look at the Sages bans here, you know you're playing against Masked on the other side when Mercury, Thor, Habwa get taken off the table. Masked, obviously known for setting the table for his team, hyper carry, knows how to put a team on his back and take it all the way to the finish line. Whereas the Wardens, going a little bit more traditional. Aphrodite, obviously dominating the meta at this point in time. Marty taking off the board. Yamoja has been powerful since the second they hit release character over at hi-rez Studios. Now we're heading into the second ban phase. I mean, the Sages and Wardens are 2, let's face it, SPL caliber teams here.
We will overrun our enemies.
Do you think Terra is the first lock in here? Do you think it's going to be more pocket pick situation or just play the meta?
That's a good question. I do think that it could go either way because this is a meta where there are characters that are very well defined as better than others. I think that typically after, season shakes down a little bit, we've had time to play around with the patch. We've got the pick and counter pick situation kind of move into a phase where you can sort of develop that a little bit deeper. These players tend to go deeper into their pockets because things are just not as highly valued later on. But at least in the early stages of the 10.3 patch, which is the one we're playing on right here, it very clearly is things like the Terra, the Emoja are the best supports, and it's non-negotiable. Things like the Guan Yu, the Hercules are the best solo laners. It's pretty hard to argue against them.
Well, Guan Yu and Kern locked in for the Wardens, and I want to get to that Kern in just a second here. Hades and Izanami being hovered, but that Kernunos. Now, Panda Cat moving into the middle lane for the Wardens, obviously a storied Hunter player of Jade Dragon's fame. I'm very curious to see whether Panda Cat tries to kind of edge towards these Hunters in the middle lane, like we just saw Dardes do with the Amus and Cobb, or trying to maybe take more mages into the middle lane, even though it's probably not, his most comfortable picks.
And I think that's a pretty crazy parallel you just made there because Dardes, a ADC player that transferred into the mid lane, Panda Cat also an ADC player that transferred into the mid lane. Dardes now playing for the Jade Dragons. Panda Cat used to play for the Jade Dragons. And I think you've also hit the nail on the head with the play style here and the potential pick situation, because Kernunos is a character that I think the Wardens drafted as opposed to the Ishtar, which is traditionally considered to be pretty comparable power level over in the dual lane, specifically because in this first pick selection, or at least the first round of picks, you can hide that pick and where it's going to actually be going. It's sort of flexible, dual lane or mid lane. There's no clear indication of where that one's going. And when you have two players that are such high caliber ADC players like PandaCat and Griff, there's no telling which one of them's going to end up with this god, and makes it a little bit more trepidatious for the Sages to try to ban out either one of them. And because of that, they're going to have to take their attention to the jungle instead.
Another shot at Mass there in the Bakasura, a couple of mages off the board for the Wardens. And we can talk about the Wardens all day long, but one player I'm really looking at here from the Sages is Jangaru out of the jungle. I mean, we've seen Jangaru single-handedly carry games similar to how Mass can pop off for the Wardens. We've seen the Cirquet go into the hands of Jangaru to great effect, as well as other hyper-carry junglers. Are you looking for something more aggressive with the current 1-2-3 we're seeing? Or what are they looking for out of the jungle for Jangaru?
I would actually like to see something a little bit more early game oriented to go along with this Hades, because Hades needs his blue buffs. He needs attention on his side of the map, or else he can get steamrolled early on, and he doesn't scale quite as well as something like the Guan Yu, who also happens to very significantly require a blue buff. So I think that putting some additional attention there, putting something like an Awilish, a Cirquet that you mentioned, or this Daji's not really what I was going for, but something to help fight in that lane and specifically try to put this Guan Yu behind and the Hades ahead is probably where I'd be putting my attention.
Obey my call.
Well, that Daji, I mean, after the Merlin pickup for the Wardens, that Daji is just going to be hunting the middle lane all game long. Merlin, not the most mobile of gods, has that blink away, of course, but after that, you're really relying on the beads. Final shot here for the Wardens, and speaking of Merlin, I think that lets us know where the Carnunos is going to go, into the hands of Griff over there in the dual lane. Most likely, Merlin headed to the mid lane with PandaCat. So now we're looking for our final pick here, and it looks like it's going to be the Awilish for Masked in the Jungle.
Interesting, and that's probably to go alongside the Atlas. Obviously, you get the Atlas knock up into the Awilish pull. That's a pretty decent tool to take down these frontliners, but, you know, you say that, Dimes. Terra immune to those knockups at times if she has one of those standing stones active, and Hades also known to, you know, be a bit of a pillar of himself, a pillar of agony in particular. I do think, yeah, I'm pretty proud of that one. I like the way that one ended up.
It's like I'm casting with Spooky.
Oh, don't put that evil on me, man. But the Awilish rounding it out, giving them a bit of additional aggression to go alongside a largely scaling roster that the Wardens have here. I think it's a pretty good final piece of this puzzle, and I'm pretty satisfied with the way that the Wardens draft ended up.
Well, Kaizo, we got two heavy hitters here in the Sages and the Wardens, and let's head into the battleground of the gods and see how it all shakes out. So best of three. So even if the comps don't shake out this first game, they can go back to the drawing board, figure out what went wrong. But of course, we got 30 or 40 minutes of gameplay before we even start thinking about game number two. And, you know, you might curse me for this, Kaizo. I'm hoping this one goes 3.
You're hoping it goes to 3, man. I think that you might get that wish whether we like it or not, because I do agree these are two pretty similarly skilled teams, I would say. Obviously, we haven't gotten to see them like putting their all into these games outside of maybe some rumblings of what might happen in scrims and private, but this is our first time actually seeing them in a full 5v5 setting, and I do think that we're likely to see this one go pretty close, but while we have the time to at least dive a little bit deeper into the minutia here, Dimes, before things start popping off. I want to draw everybody's attention to these ADCs, because there's been a lot of discussion for what these starts are going to look like. There's a couple of different ones. You've got an early crit rush, you've got the Bloodforge very early on, and then what Renjaru and Griff are going for, which is this gleaming ear cuffs and the whatever, oh my god, I'm drawing a blank, but whatever that thing turns into, that thing on your screen, that gives you a whole bunch of good stats that ADCs traditionally want. It gives you mana sustain in lane, it gives you auto attack speed, and it gives you a decent amount of power for not a whole lot of gold. I think that we're going to be seeing a lot more of this, because it really does feel like sort of the jack of all trades ADC item, and then, you know, maybe get a different starter later on that you ordinarily wouldn't have gotten, an Eye of the Jungle, a tank item. The world is your oyster if you're going for this, as opposed to something a little bit more standard like the Hunter's Cowl.
Jangaru blinking in on a mask. Little flip over the top there by the Hunter on the Chaos side. Jangaru following up with those 1,000 cuts, and the teleport saved there. but not enough damage at level 3 to take down Mask. It's going to be a TKO, though. Heading back to base is the jungler for the Kaolin Wardens. And one more thought here on this left side of the map, Kaizo.
Sure.
With both of these ADCs starting with such different builds, who are you looking at to come online a little bit earlier, maybe get the pressure in the lane and translate that to something like a Gold Fury or a middle lane fight?
We already are seeing a little bit of that. The wave pressure should always be going to this Izanami. Renjara just clears so much more quickly than Griff is capable of. But once we get these kinds of engagements, Dimes, it's going to be Griff and Gino that end up on the better end of it. The Kernanos has incredible boxing tools, and so does Snatty over here. But he's getting taken down.
Shot down by Mass. It's Jengaru versus the world here. Relentless One, a couple of sweeps there with the broom, is going to shove off the jungler. And it's a quick 1-0 in the solo lane from the Kaolin Wardens. Getting going very early. Privative forcing out Griff. Beads are down. Maybe a little bit preemptive there from Griff, and that's going to maybe bite him a little bit later when Jengaru makes his rotations.
I don't think that he necessarily needed them. Maybe thought that Renjara was perhaps a little bit closer, or some additional follow-up damage could be coming, but you're absolutely right. That does open up Griff to a little bit of attention from Jengaru, who doesn't get any kill credit because, you know, the Wardens ended up getting the kill and Jengaru a little too late to clean up there, but will tick over to level 5 here pretty soon. Should be just another couple of camps, and then could be Griff's next purple buff, maybe the shield buff that could be the next objective that we're looking for when it comes to what Jengaru is going to be doing with this time. And I do think that is a pretty critical talking point for these games, especially early on, is where are these junglers lending their attention? So Deskai mentioned maybe the solo lane could be a pretty good spot because this is a pretty volatile one between the Hades and the Guan Yu. But when you're something like Jengaru on this Daji, and you're primarily playing around an ultimate cooldown, specifically one that requires the enemy to not have crowd control immunity, it's a lot less planning ahead of time and a lot more determining what your best opportunity is as it crops up. I think Griff very well may be that next opportunity.
And meanwhile, on the other side, a Hydra's Lament already on the table for Mast, who I think we can agree one of the more aggressive junglers in your face style that we've seen in the SEC and the SPL even, and on a character like a Wheelish, who's level 5, has got a crazy amount of damage in that Feather Step. That last auto could be the difference between the Grayscale and staying alive for some of these squishy mage characters.
And that's traditionally where you'd see something like a Jotun's Wrath, which is likely to be what Jengaru is going for here. But I do think that a Willish is one of those characters that does have a good enough auto attack chain alongside the usage of her kit that allows her to facilitate a lot of those Hydra's Lament procs. You get the knock up into an auto attack, Feather Step, auto attack, etc. It's a lot of good value from that item and gives you a pretty good kill threshold.
Griff being aggressed on here has to drop that Wild Hunt. Does connect onto Renjaru, keeps the pressure off of his head for just a second here, but that's going to be an ultimate for nothing. Privative did pop ultimate though, so 1-for-1 trade over here in the dual lane. Renjaru yanked back in, but a great set of walls there from Privative is going to stop the aggression. Gino forced back under tower, and Griff just has to watch. Jengaru. There's too many Jengarus and Renjarus, and they all get so confusing. Made the rotation over the left-hand side, but doesn't find it.
Those names are so cute together, man. I don't know if it was planned between Renjaru and Jengaru, but either way, I like the way it sounds together. It is pretty confusing to say all at once, but while we're talking about Jengaru, he has finally missed that window onto Griff. Those beads come back online. The Wild Hunt obviously being down takes a little bit of safety away from him, but that was the main target that you'd ideally have liked to have been looking for as Jengaru, at which point maybe a little bit more attention. Solo lane, mid lane, could be potentially moving elsewhere on the map now that dual lane doesn't have that easy target for him.
Massive respect to both of these junglers. I mean, this map is covered in wards. As there's an engagement on the right-hand side here, that Gamma Ray burst being channeled here by Gino comes through. Snatty low, Snatty out of mana. Relentless One on the back end. Oh my goodness, Jengaru finds Mass in the meantime, but it's going to fall very quickly to Relentless One. A 2v1 swing for the Kaolin Wardens, and a very healthy rotation from the Chaos Squad.
And it's fortunate that they do manage to get one of those kills back onto Master. Jengaru turns around and puts just barely sufficient damage to finally bring him down. And that could have been such a different engagement, Dimes, if Snatty had a little bit more mana available to him. That Pillar of Agony ultimate still available. Could have potentially made some pretty significant change to that fight if he had gotten a heal off, for example. But just good recognition from the Wardens once again so far this game of they have an opportunity where the enemy team is devoid of resources. They've capitalized on it pretty well so far.
Not much follow-up, though. The map hasn't been open enough. Obviously, Pyromancer not quite online yet. Junglers are making sure all the camps have been down, so invades have been minimal at best. And with a 3-1 lead here, gold lead is negligible. I mean, we're looking at 300, which is, you know,
right.
a couple of health pots and maybe a couple of Century wards. So for all intents and purposes, both of these teams essentially even, really looking for that one big play to bust this game open.
And credit to the Sages because they are down the 2 kills, but like you said, they are certainly keeping up in farm. It's actually the dual lane primarily that is keeping them in this one on the gold graphs because Renjaru has at least a small lead, call it a half level over Griff, and then another half to a full level in the support role Privative over Not Gino by just a pretty small margin, but that is very significant when you're otherwise behind on the map. It means that they're farming very effectively. They're getting whatever opportunities they can, even while the aggression comes in from the Wardens.
3v3 over this shield buff here. Gino looks for the pull-in, finds it on Renjaru. Privative popping the Terra ultimate there, and Gino dropping very low, very quick. He's going to be yoinked back in. Renjaru is going to find the final shot onto that one, and a great pickup there from the Athenian Sages. Draws back their lead.
And a pretty good microcosm of what you can expect from the Wardens to be doing, or excuse me, from the Sages to be doing in the early stages of this one. Not Gino not having the beads makes him a prime target for that Daji ultimate, not to mention the fact that they can drop just about anything else on the back end of it, because without somebody to really draw some attention off of him, Mast is going to have a difficult time getting into these fights. And while Griff does have some pretty good control with the Kernanos ultimate, you're not going to be able to out-peel the Terra ult with the Daji ult on top of it. Some pretty prime tank-killing tools in the early stages, and Sages put it on show right there.
Once again, though, a kill kind of just opens up a couple of buffs, but not a major objective as, oh boy, the jungler for the Sages here might be in a spot of trouble. Yanked back in about 12 different times here, and Mask is going to find the final shot onto the opposing jungler. So it's going to be a 4v5 for the next 10 seconds or so here. Mask hovering around the middle lane. And I'm really looking at these two mages to get online just a little bit more, maybe finish up a penetration item or two, and that's going to give them the shred they need to make something happen.
And it's largely going to be PandaCat in that conversation for somebody that's going to be showing up a little bit sooner. Yu Wang needs a whole lot more levels to make his kit more useful. He only has so many buttons, whereas Merlin has a lot more buttons. There's some good math for you from the cast, and I do think that Merlin generally, even with one rotation of the kit, is at least comparable to what the Yu Wang is likely to be doing at this stage of the game at least. So Nehu going to be pretty content to farm up, whereas PandaCat could potentially look to get a little bit more aggressive early on, though it doesn't seem like they're looking to do much of that considering the fact that it's a lot of playing around the side lane as opposed to the mid.
Ooh, Griff dropping the wild hunt there, but Renjaru able to escape with just about a quarter of the health bar remaining there. And most of the aggression really focused on this left-hand side. We saw the early first blood gank in the solo lane. That came up for good dividends out of the Wardens, but otherwise it's this middle lane, it's this Gold Fury side of the map that's seeing all of the pressure from both the Sages and the Wardens.
And it's mostly coming from Mast walking aggressively into the jungle. And actually, I say that Gold Fury is going on right now.
And it is going down quick. It's going to be a coin flip. Jengaru finds the first one on a PandaCat. The Wardens take down the objective, though. Gamma Ray Burst being channeled. Meanwhile, Gino charging forward, but not much follow-up here from the Wardens. So Gino's going to have to get out of dodge. Not going to happen. A double for the jungler of the Sages, but the Gold Fury goes in the pocket of the Wardens.
And Gino maybe had the wrong read on that play, dashing forward and then immediately getting abandoned by the remainder of the team. Wonder if that was maybe a communication disconnect, or if not Gino just looking for a bit too much there. They do end up getting the Fury, like you said, but on account of the fact that the Wardens get the better end of the fight and the beads off of Gino, that still facilitates a further opportunity for them, and that apparently leads to this Pyromancer's Nehu gets incredibly low there times. He almost fell down to that.
It seems like maybe a little bit of an oversight there by the Kaolin Wardens. You know, the left side objective is down, so the natural progression of the map is to look to the right-hand side in the Pyromancer, but not much vision, not much personnel presence over there, so able to pick that one up for free are the Athenian Sages and maybe pop this lead open a little bit more. Certainly, it's a slight lead, but it's the largest lead we've seen all game. Ooh, a great knock up there from Mask. A beads out of Snatty. Relentless One also blowing the ultimate there. So a bit of a wasted kit there out of the Kaolin Wardens and trading it all for just a pair of beads for the solo laner of the Sages.
Relentless One was a little bit fast on the trigger there with the Guan Yu ult, but I do like that they immediately called it off when they saw the beads go down, because Snatty successfully gets under tower without getting a Willish ulted thanks to those beads, and still had that Pillar of Agony ult available, which you could argue potentially they could kill him through, but I'm going to be honest with you, Dimes, that would be close at best. So very disciplined from the Wardens to just back up and say, you know, we got the cooldown, we used more than we potentially needed to, but no sense in going too far.
We're approaching that time in the game now, 12, 15 minutes around, where we're going to start seeing these solo laners make rotations. We're going to start seeing the two players have impacts in these team fights. Who are you really looking at, this Guan Yu or this Hades, and how are you looking at them to make a real impact in these team fights?
It is a pretty important distinction to draw between the two, because Snatty is going this full damage build where he's traditionally going to be playing like an assassin, and hang on, Rinjaru almost assassinated Mask!
One more shot onto the jungler, but Mask able to leap away there. Rinjaru taking an easy 2v1, or what looked easy for the Hunter. But on the flip side here, coming around the rotation, Wild Hunt dropped. But up into that Powwow, one shot, two shot, down.
And that's so tough for Griff there, because he obviously didn't have the vision required to know that the Jangaroo rotation was coming in. Not to mention the fact that what a horrible matchup that must be for the Kurdanos, being incapable of ever polymorphing Jangaru, because as soon as you see that animation coming out as the Daji, you can just jump up on top of that Powwow and be completely immune to it. Not to mention also forcing out the beads at the same time there. It's pretty much doom and gloom if Griff ever has Jangaru directly on top of him in a 1v1 like that.
4-2-1, the jungler for the Sages. Maybe you were looking for something a little more early game in picks and bans, but it looks like this Daji is panning out just fine so far.
Yep.
Level parities is pretty even across the board, though. A little bit of a lead for the Sages support to the tune of 2 levels. But hunters, mids, junglers, pretty much everyone you want to see keeping pace is doing so.
And that's pretty crucial here, because they absolutely need to do so. They have all of the tools required to get to the late game and be a relevant force, but getting there could have potentially been some issues for them. Mast is on a character that has a lot of snowball potential, and they've done a good job of preventing that, at least so far.
Ooh, Privative getting chunked down there by Panda Cat on the Merlin. And with Gold Fury respawning here, it's going to be crucial to send the support back to the base, make sure you can get ward pressure and personnel presence as well around this left side objective. Relentless One is dropping quite low to Snatty's Hades on this right side.
He should be fine here, at least in theory. I mean, some good damage would potentially threaten him, but he's got the tools required to get himself on out of there. In fact, trading ults, that's completely voluntarily from Relentless One there. He gets out with, you know, 2-digit health bar, but maybe that could be a result of the fact that he thinks that a Gold Fury could be coming up, trying to play around that cooldown timer, which is a little bit shorter than that of Snatty, just because he's got that Genji's Guard online, only now gets that Breastplate of Regrowth after that cooldown goes down. It's a pretty narrow window to play with there if they were going to try to play around it, but technically something they could be looking to do.
No teleport online for either of these solo laners, so they're going to be hoofing it to whatever objective their teams want to try to take. Privative almost yanked there by Gino. And it's just been a jungler all day long kind of game. 3-1-1 for Mast. On the flip side, 4-2-1 for Jangaru. It's just going to be a wait and see kind of game here, as it's 5-4 in favor of the Athenian Sages.
I do think that's pretty consistent with what we've been seeing a lot of so far. It's slower games, it's a lot of junglers dictating the pace and making things happen on the map where otherwise not a whole lot going on. But right now, at least, we got a Gold Fury fight.
And our first 5v5 of the game. Solo mainers have made their rotations here. but not quite willing to start anything up. Relentless One looking for an engagement, but it's just going to be a reset from both of these squads. Maybe playing a little too big for their britches. Snatty heading back to solo. Rinjaru versus the combination of Gino and Griff here. And once again, it's just slow, steady, farm up, items online. Pyromancer dropping down here to the combined forces of Snatty and the jungler on that dodgy.
And that exact interaction is actually what we've been seeing a whole lot of so far this game, Dimes. It goes largely unnoticed as far as action on screen goes, but numerically, the Sages are playing this map phenomenally. They are 1 kill ahead, but they've managed to mount for themselves a pretty significant lead now for a 17-minute game. It's about 3,000 gold, 3,000 experience as well, and it's while the Wardens are trying to force some kind of issue. Every time the Sages go to make some kind of reset or go to farm their camps, they respond to the pressure of the Wardens with just enough presence, with just enough intent, and then they go back to farming. They're getting their camps, they're getting neutral farm, they've gotten 2 of these Pyromancers as well now. The Sages are just out farming the Wardens and starting to make itself pretty apparent here. It's not an issue quite yet, but if this map state, if this momentum continues for another 5-10 minutes, we could be looking at a vastly different landscape.
And with that Pyro headed the way of the Athenian Sages, keep an eye on Snatty with that bomb in his pocket. That could make a tower siege, a Gold Fury pull, all that much more likely as long as Snatty is in the general vicinity. Speaking of general vicinities, both these teams really squaring up on this left-hand side. Solo laners have essentially abandoned their lanes. In the middle lane here, Jingaru maybe a little bit too forward. But Nehu forced out onto the dragon and pushing forward now. Relentless One not popping the cavalry charge. Very disciplined there from the solo laner. And it looked like what could have been an initiation there is just going to settle back down into these ones.
Yeah, I think you, me, and everybody on the map at the same time all saw Nehu use that cooldown unprompted and think maybe Relentless One could be going in. He even also thought that he could be going in there, dashing forward, but like you said, holds onto the ult. Maybe you could argue that with Privative and Renjaru on the left-hand side, not quite under the tower yet, that was some kind of opportunity that the Wardens could have looked to force. But once again, Dimes, the Wardens try to play aggressive, don't manage to get their opportunity fulfilled, and it's the Sages just continuing to farm. It is a slow but steady climb for them. Now they're actually positioned pretty prominently around this Gold Fury pit. Could look to pull this one without the Wardens here to contest.
Gino at 3/4 HP might be a good opportunity here with the Athenian Sages having a bit of a health advantage. Relics and ultimates also headed the way of the Athenian Sages. Panda Cats, well, doesn't have an ultimate, but it's going to be down for
Technically.
Stance Switch is going to be down for a little bit here, but ultimates online, relics online. It's really just going to be who decides to pull the trigger first, and then I'm really looking at the reinitiation. You know, the defending solo laner either diving in the back line or making their presence known and seeing how a team is going to respond to being leapt upon.
And as we're talking about, you know, relics and solo laners, we mentioned earlier no TP was available for either one of these guys. And that's not because it was on cooldown, Dimes. Neither one opting to get a teleport, which is a bit extraneous for my money because we're pretty accustomed to seeing these guys picking them up. But obviously Relentless One and Snatty both feeling fairly threatened by the crowd control, getting beads, now pulling this Fury.
And the Fury is going down. Gamma Ray Burst shredding the protection. Sages pick it up.
Good
for
shot.
Almost nothing there. Gino almost being able to secure it for the side of the Kaolin Wardens, but Gold Fury's going to go down, and now that pressure has been lifted off the left side of the map. Our eyes turn to the Pyromancer, maybe even the Fire Giant, as we're past 20 minutes in this match now.
And it's shocking that the Sages managed to actually secure that one for them. It is pretty commonplace to see an Atlas, you know, ult onto the Gold Fury and try to steal it. He doesn't end up getting it. I'm not saying he necessarily should have. I'm just surprised that the Kaolin Wardens weren't really there in force for it. They were playing so aggressively to just let that one go through. And hang on, Relentless One has died.
Whew, Relentless One forced into the cavalry charge after the massive damage comes out from the Athenian Sages. A couple of ultimates burned though, so keep an eye on the jungler and the mid laner. That Paolo and the Dragon down, those are both huge teamfight ultimates. Same thing can be said for the Terra here. Pyromancer gonna drop to the Sages with no problem with all the space they created. Snatty throws out that Pillar of Agony just for fun and almost takes out Panda Cat in the meantime.
Panda Cat tried to hang on to the beads there, didn't want to use them to walk out of the Hades ult, and then realized partway through, oh my god, I do need to use these to walk out of the Hades ult. So he does end up losing almost his entire health bar. He's onto the Aegis and the life at least, but Sages continue to just outplay the map for my money over the Kaolin Wardens. It is worth noting that, during that engagement, Griff was in left lane. He got some good farm over there that did not go to Renjaru, who only now returns over there, having been present for that fight. And as we can see on the map here, that tier 1 tower absolutely missing as well. That's some good global gold to donate to the rest of the team and kind of stalemate this lead that the Sages have been getting. Really seems like ever since the Wardens stopped playing quite so aggressively, they've been doing a much better job of keeping that farm pretty consistent and making sure that they don't fall at least any further behind the Sages, maintaining about 4,000 gold lead, call it 3.5, depending on wave to wave and the state of the camps. But it is starting to stall out here, Dimes.
Kaizo, while we have a moment of respite here, I want to revisit these ADC builds that we touched on at the very beginning of the game.
Oh, thank you.
Very much have diverged here with the Griffin Wings, the Bloodforge really being the only two common denominators between these two sides. Crit is online, Pen is online, but in very different forms.
And thank you to production, shout out printers and all those guys for hovering this Griffin Wing so I could remember what this item is called, because it absolutely is Griffin Wing earrings, and it makes your auto attacks basically hit scan. If you're an FPS player, you certainly know what that means. Essentially, if you are in the targeter for the auto attack, you will get hit by it because it's going that much faster than traditionally you would think. And that is pretty important. It makes your damage much more reliable, especially on something like the Izanami, where without that stim, it can feel a little bit more awkward to land land that damage. But moreover, just all the stats in the item are phenomenal. And it gives you a nice bridge option early on. You can see Griff declined to pick up a starter item. That's because Griffin Wing sort of gives you all of what you would ask for in that slot and allows you to have a little bit more freedom. Interested to see what he ends up rounding out the build with, because while the difference right now is different.
Shaddy's getting aggressive on here. Pillar of Agony used for the CC immunity. Meanwhile, Masked also blows that Awelish ultimate. Relentless One holding onto the cavalry charge. So it's going to be ult for ult over here in the solo lane. Blink was used as well, though, by Masked. So keep that in mind, looking at initiations from the jungler of the Kaolin Wardens. Going to either have to use that leap onto Suku or just find a great knockup, not able to use the blink to close the distance.
And keeping the beads and the blink on Snatty is so critical there, because he absolutely needs them to be fairly safe here. He's got a Mantle of Discord, which Dimes, I don't think that I've seen this item in probably a season and a half, because it's just like everybody was obsessed with all of the mitigation options. You had like Oni Hunter's Garb, you had Spirit Robe, all of these different items flying around. This is just your standard run-of-the-mill. This is effective defense for you. And it also gives you a little bit of crowd control immunity on that pulse out, gives you very brief stun. This used to be a staple of these solo laner builds, and it is pretty much the only staple solo laner item in this build for Snatty, otherwise being completely damaged. It's going to be the only thing keeping him alive so far.
Gold Fury dropping on the left-hand side, and the Kaolin Wardens using that opportunity to create a little bit of space and make sure they claim that Fire Giant pit for themselves. The Wardens rotate over to this right-hand side, now stacked as a 5-man unit. Maybe looking to run it down this tier 1 tower. Just a couple more autos is going to take that objective off the map. Put a little more gold in their coffers as they look to reclaim a little bit of the lead that they had in the early portions of this game and have since lost. Now we're getting to that Fire Giant dance portion of the game, Kaizo. Who are you looking at to have that long-range poke potential to really chunk down the enemy squad before heading in completely?
Apparently it's going to be the Wardens, who are continuing to be the aggressors in this one, despite the fact that they are pretty much behind for the vast majority of this game so far. They're still 5,000 gold down, and they're going to go ahead and grab this Fire Giant, or at least start it up, but with the Wardens around, I don't think the Sages are going to have that opportunity. It's not a whole lot of times that you get to see a game like this where, despite being so far down on their opposition, the Wardens are dictating the pace of the game. They're controlling what objectives are being contested and when, determining what farm is available for the Sages to get. They're still playing like they've got the lead, Dimes, despite the fact that the Sages are technically sitting pretty comfortably in this one.
You know, I'm getting a lot of vibes from, if you were able to catch the SPL matches today, Snoopy playing the Merlin. I'm getting a lot of the same feelings from Panda Cat on this Merlin, where
Mhm.
it's consistent poke, right? It's consistent opening the door, and I think that's why the Sage was having such a hard time finding an in. Because I mean, what do you try to initiate, right? But what are you going to do? You're going to get rained on by Wild Hunt. You're going to get shot down by the Merlin. Gino's going to yank you and put you wherever you want. This is such a difficult team to engage into. The Athenian Sages are going to have to find some sort of pick in the jungle or maybe a misstep out of the Kaolin Wardens.
And it very well may be that, or the fact that they just have a very all or nothing draft that they're working with. They have Hades ult, Terra ult, these big team fight go button ultimates that if you don't want to be risking your life or risking the state of the game, you aren't traditionally going to get a whole lot of value out of it. Snatty is essentially not much of a character unless he's all in engaging onto the enemy team. So it could be just playing a little bit more careful that's resulting in the fact that the Sages aren't moving forward, but now that Mass used that ultimate ability and didn't successfully pull in Snatty, this could be a good opportunity for the Sages to start this one up.
And they are going to start it up. The Sages chunking down the Fire Giant to a little over half. 2 bombs in the pocket here for the Order Squad. Could drop those for an easy secure. Gino falling rapidly. Nehu is going to take out the support for the Kaolin Wardens. Dodgy in the backline, raining havoc on Panda Cat here. But a good backup here from Griff. A Wild Hunt and one more shot going to take out the jungler there. Meanwhile, the other ADC on the Athenian Sages side is going to find a relentless one. And it's going to be a 2 for 3 in favor of the Athenian Sages, who have plenty more in the tank on the backs of Rinjaru and Nehu.
And ADC players in the chat who are looking to move up in the world, take notes, man, because that is a perfectly played fight from Griff there. Your job as an ADC in a fight like that where things aren't going well for you is not to try to kill the enemy's support. It's not to do what your job traditionally would be. Well, hang on a second, because Dime's Panda Cat just took down Rinjaru. But what I'm trying to get at here, if we could stop scrapping for just a moment, is that Griff dashes toward his mid laner, who is under fire in that fight, and does everything in his power to keep him alive. Your job as backliners in late game team fights is to keep each other safe first, and then look for kills second. And Griff absolutely did a fantastic job of that there, moving forward and dashing directly at Panda Cat to peel Jangaru off of him. There was additional support from Privitive there, but just because of how effective Griff was, they didn't actually manage to get him.
So much shred on the side of Kaolin Wardens here, wailing away on the Fire Giant that is falling rapidly low. Fire Giant going down to the side of the Kaolin Wardens, who have taken a grip on this game for the first time in a minute. Panda Cat taking out Snatty. Dodgy turning the tables there. Nehu with some great follow-up as well. And the Fire Giant is already stripped off of 2 members of the Kaolin Wardens. More follow-up here. Privitive locking down Panda Cat. The jungler, Dodgy, leaping in the backline, but Mass immediately putting him in the ground and finds a double on the side of Nehu. Privitive and Rinjaru, the dual lane from the Sages, have to just look on as Mass has their way with the rest of their team.
So, in the end, it is a 3 for 3, but it is important to note that Fire Giant stripped off of 3 members for the Wardens, mean that that's traditionally going to favor the Sages here. Relics mostly in favor of the Wardens despite that fact. They've got a lot of their cooldowns only now beginning to come up as these players are respawning. So even though they lost a large number of members with Fire Giant, they've still got at least Mast, who has been a large portion of their driving force in this one, still with that buff available to him. Panda Cat, who's going to be dropping down, like you were mentioning earlier, that long-range poke damage that is so valuable on these sieges, also has the buff available to him. Even though the Wardens trade 3 for 3, they very well could look to, if nothing else, strip all these towers off the map. I think that's probably going to be your baseline for what the Wardens are planning to do with this one. Just get that global gold into pocket, see how these Sages react so far. Because they have been playing very reactionary, and they might just let all these towers go down for free, at which point the Wardens are pretty satisfied with that, but they step too far forward. If there's an opportunity that the Wardens recognize, then we could see maybe a Phoenix siege.
Despite being down here, the Wardens certainly in the driver's seat. Momentum on the map squarely on the side of the Chaos Squad. It's a 5v5 once again, as both sides have all of their members out of the underworld and back on the battlefield of the gods. Ultimates up on both sides. Like you said, relics maybe a little bit in the favor of the Kaolin Wardens now, with just about a minute and change left on the Athenian Sages actives in pocket. And it's going to be a tier 1 siege, the last tier 1 tower on the map here. Kaolin Wardens going in, but Primitive popping the ultimate early and getting yanked in by Mast. Immediately goes down. Snatty all inning, not popping the ultimate. And meanwhile, in the back line, getting shredded are the Kaolin Wardens. And it's Relentless One chasing down Nehu in the back line. Jengaru finds a double. Snatty is not going to find the kill onto Mast. Mast takes down a third. And the jungler for the Athenian Sages getting chased out by Gino here. Not likely to find the kill, but it can at least delay the back.
And they've got Relentless One at least on the chase, so they might be able to take him down, but that could not have gone worse if you're an Athenian Sages fan. Not because of only the outcome, but even the structure of that fight was favoring the Kaolin Wardens. Jengaru didn't get to go in initially because he was sitting in that green buff pit that we're looking at right now, and he's off to the left-hand side of the fight. He's looking for a target he can use that teleport on top of, or ideally to blink over that wall and to get active. Meanwhile, the Kaolin Wardens shift all of the attention over to the right-hand side. And I don't know if that's because they knew that Jengaru was in the green buff and they wanted to stay away from him, but when they engaged, when they pulled in Privative, everybody was so far away from Jengaru that he couldn't make a relevant impact on that fight. Snatty went in completely by himself and ended up having to jump out just as soon as he engaged, which prevents the Sages from using most of this all-in that they've got. It's revolving almost entirely around that Terra ult, that Hades ult combination with the Daji ult over top. If you can't get that coordination, if you can't get all those cooldowns at the same time, it's always going to be a losing fight for the Sages. And again, I don't know if that was prior planning from the Wardens, if they were aware of what was going on, but very fortunate the way that shook down either way.
You called it, partner. That Hades ultimate, a crux of the Athenian Sages engaged. Just couldn't come through in that last one. Tower goes down. Bird goes down. Middle lane has been opened up here for the Kaolin Wardens. The Sages have a little bit of a base defense to do. Fire Giant back on the map at 32. About to be 33 minutes here. Nehu forced into that Pearl Dragon there. That's going to be down for 15, 18 seconds. Quite a while. Might be a bit of an engagement here on the side of the Kaolin Wardens. Meanwhile, Fire Giant going down. Titan is going to take a couple shots here, and Jengaru's going to have to defend the middle lane. That's one character you want in the team fight. Privative surging forward here, but Chunky down quite low, getting knocked back. The Kaolin Wardens take down the Fire Giant, and Relentless One charging forward, but Griff is so low. How much follow-up is there, Rick?
I can't believe that he ended up living there. I mean, they get the Fire Giant, they take down Snatty as well, and that is due in part to, like you said, the Titan was taking damage. Somebody had to go back and answer that, and they chose Jengaru to be the one to do so. And without that ultimate, they just didn't have the engage required to step up to that one and defend. The Warden zoned incredibly deep. Relentless One was so far forward with Mass there that nobody other than Privative was comfortable stepping far enough to even, get line of sight on the Fire Giant, much less be able to contest it and attempt to steal it away. Snatty threw away his life trying to make something happen, but again, without all these puzzle pieces, if you're not assembling Exodia here for the Sages, then you're unlikely to come out on top of these team fights. And for what it's worth, the Wardens seem very well aware of that and have sort of structured their play around it. This whole game, the Sages have been playing very slow with a very small lead, not really taking any risks because they didn't want to gamble that lead. Now it's gotten to the point, Dimes, where they've completely thrown it away. They are now quite a bit in the deficit as opposed to the lead here. And it's entirely on the shoulders of the fact that the Kaolin Wardens just have not let off the gas this whole game.
And despite the early lead here from the Athenian Sages, it never felt like the Kaolin Wardens were particularly concerned. We never saw them forcing the issue. We didn't see them making some crazy comeback play. They just played it out. They knew their comp was going to scale, and scale it has. A couple Fire Giants in the pocket. Phoenix down. Left-hand side getting engaged upon now. Plenty of penetration on the side of the Wardens. Left-hand Bird going to be the next target. And it almost seems like this Kaolin Warden siege was inevitable all game long. It's going to be a 5v5. This might be the play for the Titan here. The Athenian Sages grouped up under this Phoenix. The jungler Jengaru in the middle lane, taking a 1v1 versus Mast. That might be something keep an eye on here. Primitive surging forward. No ultimate quite yet from the Terra.
Beans.
A little bit of healing. Dragons out from Nehu, not connecting with anybody. Relentless one dropping
wow!
low and goes down to the auto attacks from Renjaru with absolutely no value from the solo laner. Meanwhile, in the middle lane, Masked, it's going to fall to half HP. Gino takes out the jungler. Snatty finishes his off Mask. And the Bird still alive on the left-hand side. So
Hang on.
Being forced to retreat here without grabbing the objective they so sorely needed.
Yeah, and worse than that, Dimes, they didn't even get the middle bird, which was due to respawn. Maybe I shouldn't speak too soon because that is getting very close there with those fire minions. But Snatty and Jangaru managed to combine to keep that one alive. And I don't know. I was going to say when they were breaching the Phoenix and left, maybe you could play this a little bit slower if you're the Wardens. That tower is still up in right lane. They had the minions in mid, which was a decent threat, but ideally you'd like to spread out the resources of the Wardens so thin, or excuse me, the Sages, so thin that they can't get all of their team fight ults in the same lane and really get that value stacked on top of itself like they would like to. Instead, the Wardens just kind of forced their way in, and it was an incredible dueling dragons from Nehu, pushing Relentless One forward into that Phoenix, combined on top of a Renjaru Dark Portal that silenced the Guan Yu to prevent him from getting up into that cavalry charge and getting on out of there before his health bar ticked down. The Sages just took a fight where pretty much they couldn't have asked for a better one. The Wardens just sort of gave it to them, and instead of spreading out the map, they sort of played into their hands, and the Sages are definitely comfortable once they can get all their resources in the same spot.
I want to highlight one thing you said there, the Dark Portal out of Renjaru. I think that's the third Dark Portal we've seen, just expertly placed to either shut down a central carry or a character on the side of the Kaolin Wardens, or just to separate a team fight. Really impressive stuff so far out of the Izanami from the Athenian Sages. Fire Giant online. Fire Giant being looked at here by the Wardens, surging forward. Relentless One leading the charge. Gino in the back line with the two squishies. That'll be Panda Cat and Griff, who, as you mentioned earlier, keeping an eye out for each other here. I mean, Jangaru at this point in the game can absolutely 100-0 both the Merlin and the Kanana, so keeping a tight eye on both those carries is going to be key here for the Wardens.
Speaking of an eye, Griff has got one, and an eye on Snatty as well as he uses beads on that Willisholt. Priv is moving forward anyway here, Dimes, trying to make something happen.
I don't know what Privative can find, though, with no follow-up. Jangaru chunks down Gino in the meantime. And with Snatty backing off, it's going to be a full disengage here from the Kaolin Wardens, and that's just going to allow this team with the Terra to heal up, use those stones, a little bit of HP 5 to their advantage here, and claim superiority in this Fire Giant pit. More members of the Kaolin Wardens still staring down the faces of the Athenian Sages, though, and quickly making the rotation back into the pit here is Gino with that kinetic charge. That'll get you back in just a moment here, and it's going to be a reset. Privative, though, half HP. Keep an eye on the support. Terra ultimate down. Could be a good target here for the Wardens.
Yeah, they're going to go in immediately, and actually Griff takes down Snatty. Meanwhile, Relentless One charging forward.
Snatty able to use that Pillar of Agony, but not for very long. Nehu is now the target. Relentless One does not care at all that they're under tower. Mass finds one, Gino finds a second one, and all of a sudden it's gone from bad to worse here for the Sages of the Wardens. Charging forward. They don't even need the tower, they just need the middle lane, they just need this right-hand side, and it's on the back of Renjaru. Gonna have to find some sort of miracle save here against the four members of the Kaolin Wardens that have remained. Dark Portal being used preemptively there. Panda Cat's gonna have to watch his back. Gino, no grab yet on Renjaru. It's four low health characters here against one swinging Izanami.
Yeah, and they're going to try it anyway. It looks like they're positioning for it, Dimes, but with everybody this low, I think that Renjaru might have what it takes.
With those boomerang autos, too, dealing AoE damage, could be a big-time save here. Titan dropping down low, dropping to a quarter. Renjaru yanked back in, Aegis, and it's going to be a W for the Kaolin Wardens, clawing their way back from a deficit to take game number 1.
And in spectacularly confusing fashion, if I'm honest with you, because I really did think that the lead that the Sages had the entire game was going to be enough to get them potentially a positive position at some point during that game, Dimes. They were several thousand, upwards of 4 and 5 at that point in the lead, but they just never pulled the trigger. And it looked like, I don't know, maybe they're baiting out some kind of opportunity, they're waiting for their moment to strike, but they waited so long that the Wardens just took the game themselves. They said, all right, if you guys aren't going to play aggressively, we'll show you how it's done. And every single fight that they spread them out, There just was not enough sages in one position to get any of those fights in their favor. The Wardens just kind of ran away with the game that, frankly, never should have been theirs to begin with.
The most tenured teams all have the same characteristic, Kaizo, and it's the ability to lose with grace. And what I mean by that is to take an early deficit and do it in a way that doesn't spiral out of control, right? Either stem the bleeding or control the damage and then wait for their time. They know, these tenured teams, they know when their builds are coming online, when their comps are coming online, and it's just a matter of time for them to stall out the loss just long enough for that switch to flip and to turn the tables on a previous downslide.
And it really was masked, at least early on, making that happen, and doesn't show up on the damage charts because eventually there's only so much an Awilish can do. But it really was the driving force of a lot of this aggression, walking into the enemy jungle, making Janguru uncomfortable for the entire game, not to mention the fact that he was on snatty duty as well. He was the one responsible for making sure that Hades didn't get a good engage, because you used the word crux previously to describe how important this Hades ultimate was to this Athenian Sages draft. They didn't get a single good Pillar of Agony off that entire game. Not a single time was it stacked on top of the primitive Earth and Fury in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That really did seem to be the key component preventing the Sages from being able to come back in that one.
I feel like we should get snatty duty t-shirts made, Kaizo.
I'll wear it, man.
That was a great game number 1, and don't forget it's a best of 3 series, so we've got game number 2 coming your way in just a second. Stick around. Howdy, folks. Welcome back into the SMITE Challenger Circuit. Week number 1, day number 3. We're finishing things out in North America. Dimes here on Play-by-Play. Good pal Kaizo taking care of things on the analyst side. We just saw game number 1 between the Kaolin Wardens and the Athenian Sages. And what felt like kind of, I think the word I used was inevitable, right? The Sages had that early lead, but the Kaolin Wardens never really wavered and end up flipping it on its head to come back with the dub.
Yeah, the Sages did have the early lead and just never utilized it in any meaningful capacity. It was always the Wardens that were the ones making all of the plays happen, dictating the pace of the map. Even 4, 5, 6,000 gold behind, they were still the ones stepping up to these objectives and forcing the Sages to play a little bit more proactively. I'd like to see a bit more proactive play from them here in game number 2 because they had the table set, they just forgot to eat.
Well, proactive play starts with P's and B's. We're going to head into them right now. And I hesitate to say this was a composition problem from the Sages, right? I mean, they were utilizing it well in the early game. You saw an early, kill in the solo lane. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It felt like they were playing their game the way they should have been, and then they just kind of lost the thread. Maybe looking at the mid lane, if I'm struggling to grasp at someone who could maybe use a change in God to shake things up.
Yeah, I don't think I would agree with you. I don't think that the biggest issue there for the Sages was the team composition. I think their team composition was actually quite good for the position in the game that they were in. I think that if they just jumped in, were willing to take a risk potentially and pull the trigger on something, that they had a composition built pretty well around being able to do that. However, composition doesn't always line up directly with the intent of the team. If your playstyle is just drastically different than that all-in playstyle that they had drafted, then maybe that could be a cause for the disconnect between the gameplay and the draft that we saw. If that's the case, man, I would love to see some kind of soft engage drafted here from the Sages. They had a whole bunch of this is our team fight moment kind of buttons in game number 1. I'd love for them to draft like an Athena or something that just steps up, taunts, gets a decent amount of poke onto one character, and then reset and continue to play. They were so passive, so waiting for their moment all of game number 1. I'd love to see them change it up a little bit.
It's funny you say Athena, because when I think Privative, Athena is the first god that jumps into my mind.
True.
It's deja vu from game number 1 here in the bans. It's pretty much... Not pretty much. It is 100% the same bans in the first 6 slots across the board. Bit of a switch up here, though. Guan Yu going to be taken first here by the Sages.
And I don't think that the Guan Yu was necessarily an issue for them as opposed to the Hades. I think that it was, again, more not being able to play so proactively. But I would agree that Relentless One had a very big impact on that game, and therefore taking it away from him, changing up the look in the solo lane isn't a bad idea at all. This is what I consider to be the best solo laner in the game right now as well. He has an incredible amount of healing, cooldown reduction as well on that Conviction #1 ability that just recently got added in patch 10.3. He's also got one of the best team fight ults in the game. So if you have to give up something like this Terra Ishtar, which you've seen it once, you've seen it a million times, these are very common duo laners right now, I think that Guan Yu is going to be what I would like to see drafted instead.
It seems like these teams have flip-flopped a little bit here. Guan Yu, Cornetos, Merlin going the way of the Sages. And now we get to have this fun conversation once again with the Wardens, whether this Ishtar is going in the hands of Panda Cat in the middle lane or headed toward Griff in the duo lane. But from what you said, as the rat's being hovered on, it seemed like you were pretty sure that Ishtar and Terra are going to team up on that left-hand side.
Yeah, I would typically say so. When Ishtar first came out, and I think even a little bit at Worlds perhaps, we saw a little bit of this character in mid, and it felt fine. It felt kind of like the Kernanos to me, where it is a little bit flexible. I would argue that Kern potentially has some better tools required to stand in the mid lane than the Ishtar does. Her dash being interruptible makes her a little bit more susceptible to being ganked early on in the mid lane, so a little bit safer in the duo lane. And while the Blades of Retribution ultimate is very good as well, it doesn't necessarily work as successfully around jungle corridors as the Kernanos ult would. I think that it is a good pick and it is a decent shot at the mid lane, but I'd ideally like to see another ADC going in the, another mid laner traditional mage going the way of Panda Cat and giving this one over to Griff in the duo lane.
A couple shots at Priv, so we're not going to see Athena Athena. See Athena. Got there.
You got it, bro. You got it.
We're not going to see Athena into the hands of Privative for the Sages. Same thing goes for Khepri and Chang'e and Bakasura off the board for the Sages here. And it's going to be the Agni pickup, so it looks like your crystal ball is right this time around. And this Ratatasker, I want to chat about it for just a second here.
Sure.
Mask on a semi-global ultimate, able to make rotations at rapid pace, scares me.
Yeah, you said like something like a circuit was what is evoked by the name Masks to you, but I have to disagree, man. This particular pick, this Ratatosker, is absolutely the first god that I think of when I think of Masked. Just the global rotation potential, being able to put an impact on a wide variety of places on the map at the same time, as well as that early game aggression that this character has. I think it fits very well with his identity. It is worth noting that this is technically a solo lane option as well. We've seen Deathwalker piloting this one a little bit earlier this weekend, but it ideally would be going into the jungle role.
My steed and I are ready.
Well,
for yet
with the Lancelot pickup,
adventure.
that doesn't exactly settle things for us here.
No,
We've seen
no, it
Lancelot in the jungle and in the solo and played well in both roles.
Sure.
So it's just going to be a matter of actually getting into game. But both these squads have been rounded out. A Nox for the final pickup for the Athenian Sages. Now, we were having a conversation about Nox.
We were.
But it's a long conversation. So I'm going to save it for once we jump into the game, which is in just a second. Right now, in fact, as we get into game. Game number 2 here of game number 3. Privative on this Nox. Now, you have opinions, Kaizo,
I do.
about Nox. And I would
Several
like for you to share those opinions with me now in a semi-concise, timely fashion.
Sure, I'll do my best at that last point, although I will admit that that's not typically my strong suit. So I want to preface all of this by saying that Nox is one of my favorite mages of all time. I find it incredibly fun to just deprive fun of the enemy when I play games. I'm a very big black-blue player in Magic the Gathering, and I think that there's a very similar playstyle to Nox here in SMITE. She just prevents you from playing and does so by that silence combo, which is very good at specifically killing tanks that don't traditionally go beads and forcing people to go beads that wouldn't ordinarily want to have them. However, I think that she falls off like a cliff in the late game. I think around the jungle fight, she's very good when you can just play around one pick. But around these sieges, man, if you use beads on that combo, she is no longer a character. You are essentially trading out beads for a 10 to 15 second window where the enemy team does not have a support. And I've just never found that to be a worthwhile trade-off for you if you're the one with the Nox. And granted, this is a character that we've been seeing a lot more of recently. Polar Bear Mike literally just got done playing this one in the SPL. I'm just not super sold on it, man.
Well, speaking of beads, 5 pairs of beads. Mask goes in the middle lane here onto Jengaru. 5 pairs of beads online for the Kaolin Wardens. So at the very least, Privative has forced the issue in terms of making all of the Chaos Squad pick up their beads. And notably, that means Mask is not... Ooh, a monkey going in here on the Panda Cat. One more shot's going to do it. The Agni falling so low, but not quite enough there to pick it up. And I was about to go into this great transition about how that means no blink for Mask, and then Mask is on Lancelot, and that means Relentless one. It was going to be an awesome, like, fluid thing that I
believe you.
about. But anyways, talk about the lack of blink on Lancelot or Relentless one on Rat or whatever. Whatever.
I'll take my pick, man. And for what it's worth, Monkey Inn is going to be living in my head for the next couple of hours. But I do think it is worth noting that it is the Ratatosker being the solo laner here. I think that I would traditionally like to see both of these characters in the jungle over solo. Hang on, Gino is taking a lot of damage here. Will end up dashing away. I think Rat and Lancelot are both, for my money, better junglers than solo laners, but between the two of them, I would probably say it has to go to Ratatosker for a solo lane pick. He builds the tank options very effectively, can get that double Flurry Acorn with a whole lot of protections. One of the few characters that can pick up percent protections, which is incredibly powerful when it comes to making yourself difficult to deal with. We've seen it before, and it has been some pretty significantly effective stuff, but I don't know. I'd rather see it in the jungle.
Well, the Monkey has a blink. Lancelot doesn't have a blink, but Monkey has blink.
Monkey in.
So Monkey can go in without using the leaf to engage. Speaking of Monkey going in, Snatty and the Monkey I'm not going to be able to call Jengaru by his real name now. Combine on this right-hand side to steal away the blue buff. It's going to be a blink away from the jungler. So blue buff does go down and trade it back out here. Relentless One and Mast trading it away with the other side, solo and jungle. And it's going to be a full disengage here from the Wardens. Snatty, not too much follow-up. So both sides got a blue buff, right?
Yeah, everybody got what they came for. Both sides are walking away from that going, yeah, we at least got the invade off successfully. I think everybody's like pretty comfortable with the way that went. And the only difference is that PandaCat is invading on the map, whereas Nehu's playing a little bit more defensively. And as long as everybody gets a blue buff in solo lane, I think that everybody's going to be happy. But it really does seem like PandaCat is the one that is much happier in the mid lane. He's dashing waves pretty comfortably. He's invading in the 1v1 against Nehu. And that's pretty derivative of the fact that Agni is just a much better character early on than Merlin. Sure, Merlin has more buttons to work with, but PandaCat on this Agni has a lot more effective tools. The Flame Wave does good damage early on. The base damage on that one's pretty good. Has 3 different casts of that ultimate ability to work with, plus the very reliable crowd control coming out of that Nauseous Fume stun. Whereas Nehu on the Merlin has to, I don't know, be melee range for a knockup or put a pretty telegraphed ability on the ground in order to get his crowd control off. PandaCat just seems a little bit safer and a little bit more willing to trade early on than Nehu is on this Merlin.
And, you know, in game number 1, we saw PandaCat on the Merlin flicker into 3 different enemies and find a kill on the backside. So we know that PandaCat certainly has the chutzpah to head in and on someone like Agni who can pull the trigger and maybe even solo kill potential, dare I say, in this middle lane on this PandaCat versus Nehu matchup. But for the moment, junglers resetting, camps coming back online, ADCs and supports combining in the duo lane. All is calm on the battlefield.
All is calm for the time being, and that will typically favor the Sages here, who I do think have your traditionally later game team. Hang on, Privative under fire.
Going in deep, but a great Wild Hunt is going to immediately stop the aggression from Gino. Griff finds Privative with that last auto attack. First Blood goes to the Ishtar. Rajaru trades it back immediately. So support for support. But Benefit goes to the side with First Blood. Mast is here. Mast is going in. Jengaru goes up and down. No overhand smash for a follow-up. That horse is just so speedy.
And it is horse for horse. So in terms of horses, they've each got 1, which I do think balances out pretty well. But the thing I was trying to get to, as we see a red buff invade go down here, PandaCat doesn't seem to have, or no, he did successfully grab that one, excuse me. The later this game goes, Dimes, the more it's likely to favor the Sages.
Monkey in, smacking away at Mask. No fear, no evil, but who needs it? Privative finds the final shot. Mask going down, but Gino is here, and PandaCat is here. A couple of bombs, a flame wave, and Jengaru is roast Monkey.
And you can definitely tell that PandaCat has teamed with Captain Twig at some point because he has not used a movement ability this set that I've seen anywhere other than going forward. And obviously, you know, Captain Twig was famous for the Thunder Crash in, but it's starting to look like that Path of Flames in from PandaCat is going to be his calling card in the mid lane. And I like it, man. I really do. I think that the Wardens need to be playing a little bit more aggressively than the Sages here, which, to their credit, they seem very comfortable doing. They've been doing it so far this game. They did it all of game number 1 as well, because the Sages are going to outscale them. I feel like I've said that 3 times at this point, but there's been so much action in the meantime that I haven't fully been able to get the thought out. The Nox doesn't scale very well into the late game. However, everything else that the Sages has is completely comfortable going to full build level 20 and then stacking themselves against whatever is their opposition. Guan Yu continues to be what I consider to be the best solo laner in the game because the healing is so good, the cooldown reduction, the cavalry charge engage is very strong at all stages, especially late game. And Fear No Evil is a cooldown that will only get better with time. That is a longer duration and a longer CC duration on that ultimate with each level that Jengaru gets. The Sages have the better scaling composition, and the Wardens really need to make something happen early on.
No, Gino and Mass want to make something happen here in the middle lane. It's a 3v3. It's so tough to engage under tower pre-10 minutes. Protections just aren't there yet. It's going to be tough for supports to take on that kind of burden. So a reset for now. As meanwhile on this left-hand side, Renjaru's kind of just getting the better
Look at him.
of Griff with those auto attacks. And we didn't really talk about the Hunter builds, but once again, both of these Hunters kind of splitting off into different build paths.
And for what it's worth in this Renjaru versus Griff matchup, I heard AJ or Alpha Jack will say yesterday on the desk that he thinks that Kernanos gets the better of this 1v1 against Ishtar. He said 7 out of 10 times. I talked to a couple of ADC players as well, and I think that's pretty consistent.
Well, Priv is looking to go down here. 4 members of the Kaolin Wardens surrounding the support, but a shadow dash into the monkey is going to get Privative out of dodge with just a sliver of HP left, and that's 2 ultimates burned for no support.
And that is what we can see the Kaolin Wardens are starting to realize, is that they're on a bit of a timer here, Dimes. They have to find their moment and capitalize on it sooner rather than later. Because, for what it's worth, Masked at this stage of the game is a outright stronger character than Jingaru is on this Hunbats. And we saw the same thing in game number 1. Masked could realistically repeat performance of game 1 and start walking into this jungle, contesting Jingaru at some of this farm, but doesn't look like with the state of the map, with the way that Nehu's been playing, kind of rotating back and forth and being that additional man in the jungle at times, that Masked is willing to do that. They're slowly starting to lose out on their opportunity. But, I mean, with the way the Sages played game 1, they seem pretty comfortable to just chill out even if they do get a lead. So maybe it's not all doom and gloom after all.
Ward's peppering the map here, so it's going to be tough for either Masked or Jingaru to really make any kind of rotation unseen. Now, if the Ratatasker was in the jungle, we might see a couple more rotations with that semi-global ultimate, but not the case. So Masked just going to have to make their way in the old-fashioned way. But for a moment here, we have a second of respite. Gold Fury is online. We're only approaching 10 minutes here, though, so Hunters, not really any penetration items online. Same thing goes for the junglers. Looking at Masked, stacking up that Transcendence. So it's going to be a second before that hits 50 stacks, and Masked is going to be able to make full effect of that item.
We've got some trouble brewing, though. Look at where Relentless One is. He's on the back end of this engagement. This is going to get messy.
Gino going in with the Earth and Fury. What a great Fear No Evil to separate that fight square in half. But Griff has made the rotation and stuns 2 members of the Sages. Finds the first kill on Jingaru. Masked goes down to shots from Merlin. Here comes Snatty on the horse. Gino going down to the Kernunos. And it's a 2v1 trade in favor of the Athenian Sages. Panda Cat, 1 shot. Wild Hunt, the final inch of Wild Hunt going to secure the kill there for the Hunter. Relentless One about to fall. In return, not in return, in addition, and now this Gold Fury pit is wide open for the Sages.
Yeah, only Griff available to contest this one. It doesn't look like he even wants to step up. And, you know, Dimes, I thought that was going to go the opposite direction. Relentless One had the flank of the gods on that rotation. He not only managed to catch all the farm by proxy farming between the tier 1 tower and right and the tier 2 tower, and then making his rotation underneath. They had a perfect pincer maneuver onto Privative on this Nox. Gino even got an amazing wall to physically prevent the backing up of Privative in that spot, but they just somehow don't have the damage required to kill this Nox, it would seem. Each time they try to all-in Privative and take him out of the fight ahead of time, they're just coming up barely short of the damage threshold that they need. And you don't traditionally think of that with this prophetic cloak that, you know, it takes some time to stack up. It doesn't get all of the defense front end loaded. But apparently, this Iron Mail that he had, the tier 2 of Sovereignty, kept him alive all he needed.
In a bad spot here, forced to use the Earth and Fury. Snatty moving forward, shredding away protections. 1 more shot. The Fire Giant even helped out the Sages there, putting the finishing touches on Gino, who was just stepped up a little bit too big for their britches. Snatty, 3 members of the Athenian Sages knocked up by Relentless One. Where is the follow-up from the Wardens? Is there any follow-up?
Oh, huge! Oh my God!
From Nehu in the backside, and the Vortex finds a double kill for the Merlin. It is now Masked against the world, and Masked goes to the Grace Pit.
Yeah, Nehu just had the optimal engage there. Like, that is highlight level play from Nehu there, getting a perfect Void combo into that fight, getting the stance change as well. So much damage dumped out by this Merlin. And that's exactly the way you need to play. You are not, a single rotation of your kit is not going to be enough for you if you want to make an impact with this Merlin. You need to play aggressively, you need to get a good initial engage, as Nehu did there, and then swap to the next stance and finish everybody off. And apparently the Wardens just outright didn't know that he was there. He was on vision at one point during that fight as Snatty was moving forward, and they had Relentless One in the air to scout it out, but apparently they lost track of him and just chased too far into the jungle, perfectly into that choke point so that Nehu could dump all the damage down. And what could have been a relatively innocuous fight there where Snatty manages to get Gino and then everybody backs up, Nehu makes something out of nothing and gets not only the next 2 kills, but also that Pyromancer.
And now very quickly here, Kaizo. I mean, a 2-2 even game has been kind of blown open by the Sages, 10-3. It doesn't really feel like it to me, like it should be 10-3, but I look up and the numbers do not lie. As Jengaru finds Relentless One on this right-hand side, I mean, it looks like the Ratataskar didn't even try to put up a fight. The solo laner and the jungler for the Sages quite healthy, and make it 11-3 now as we approach 14 minutes into game number 2 here. Call it a 4,000 gold lead, a Gold Fury down as well. And now a little different from game number 1, where it kind of felt like the Wardens were just biding their time. The Sages have the momentum on their side, they have the composition on their side, and it feels a little more like in their favor this game.
And I need them to keep up this momentum for my money if they're going to end up bringing this to a game number 3. They had a lead in game 1. They kind of sat on it, didn't do a whole lot with it. I think that it's unlikely that we see them make that same mistake a second time in a row here. They're even playing a lot more proactively. We've seen a couple of dashes in from Privative trying to create some opportunities where otherwise there wouldn't have been any. I like the adaptation that they've made here because for what it's worth, they have a pretty reminiscent lead of game 1. Now they just need to transfer that into something more meaningful. This Oni Fury is due to spawn here. Relentless One once again beginning to proxy farm so that he could potentially make a rotation over there for this defense. The Sages seem to understand that this is the next point of contention, and this is essentially their moment to strike while the iron is hot.
And for me, Kaizo, as the Oni Fury is back online now, my eyes are kind of on Gino. It seems like the last few fights have kicked off because Gino stepped forward a little bit too far, but this time, it's Mask that has stepped forward too far. Jengaru drops the Fear No Evil, and down goes the jungler, but in return here, maybe the monkey goes down. Relentless One goes in, but doesn't come up with pay dirt. So it's going to be a free, clean pick for the Athenian Sages. And now Gino, once again, maybe a little bit too far forward.
Man, he's taken some decent damage that'll poke him out to about halfway, but I don't know if that's enough of an opportunity for them to pull the Fury. Athenian Sages say it is enough, and they're going to go ahead and start this one up, but the Wardens are still at least local.
No Fear No Evil online, that's important. Oni Fury goes down without a lick from the Kaolin Wardens. Now this gold lead is starting to mount up, call it 5.5k around there. And we're getting to that point where it's going to be more and more on the Athenian Sages to make a hiccup than the Kaolin Wardens to make some great macro play.
And the Kaolin Wardens have not been playing nearly as clean here in Game 2 as they did in Game 1. The aggression from them felt a lot more metered in Game 1, and now... Hang on a second, what is this?
Monkey go in, Monkey go down. Griff with those sunny swords takes out the jungler. Rinjaru dropping low as well. Here comes Mask, making a good rotation for the first time this game. It seems like 1-4-2. Is that mean? Kind of felt a little mean. Privative out of mana, being chased down by Relentless One. No dash away, but here comes Snatty for the peel. Dash in, slow, just a couple more autos from the Ratataskar. It's just going to be a matter of who gets their dash online first. Relentless One takes out Privative and able to get away scot-free.
And, you know, we were talking about, I think you used hiccup as the word that needed to come out of the Sages. They, like, full-on belched on the Wardens there
like
between their Tier 1 and Tier 2 towers. I don't have, frankly, any idea what that was supposed to be from them, playing very aggressively between those structures without that critical piece of their composition, which is Jengaru's Hunbat's ultimate. No Fear No Evil means they don't have the best fight. Like, they are entirely reliant without that cooldown on either Snatty getting an engage and he wasn't even present there, or Privative getting some kind of Nox combo onto somebody. They just sort of tried to force it anyway, which, you know, I did call for them to play more proactive, try to be a little bit more aggressive, make something happen with that lead, but that felt much more forced as opposed to the sort of calculated play that we've seen from them up until this point in game 2.
Just a little bit of a bump in the road there for the Sages. Second Pyro goes their way. Still about a 5,000 gold lead-ish. Call it 4,000 at this point, 4.7 to be specific. So not like the Sages totally throwing away their lead. The Kaolin Wardens just finding a nice opportunity to take advantage of, and they do so. But Sages looking for more opportunities. Major objectives on the map. Looking now, Fire Giant obviously online. Tier 1 in the middle lane could be a potential objective of value for the Athenian Sages. Otherwise, just Tier 2s, and maybe the Sages don't have quite enough pressure yet to try to handle those.
Yeah, and this is the stage of the game where it feels like it's difficult to do something with a smaller lead like this one. When I'm coaching teams, it always feels like they say, I have no idea what to do at this point because there's no Gold Fury, there's no Pyromancer, we don't have a big enough lead to pull Fire Giant. What are we supposed to do with a small lead 18 minutes into the game? And it's a lot of setting up for your next opportunity, waiting for your opponent to make a mistake, like Snatty's making right now, or looking to siege down these towers. But now that Snatty has the cavalry charge forced out, everybody's low, Wardens are here, that's not happening anytime soon.
Could just be a full disengage here from the Athenian Sages. So actually Snatty pushing so far forward does pay dividends. That tier 2 tower on the right-hand side goes down. And able to get away for just a cavalry charge. That'll be back online before you know it there. Privative chucking out that shadow ball, going bowling just for fun. Trying to break up the monotony a little bit here, but we're coming up to 20 minutes in this one. 12-6, gold lead still pretty decent here for the Sages. Snatty pushing forward here. And if there's one, I mean, obviously we've highlighted Jengaru and that Fear No Evil and Nehu being two critical pieces of the team fight for the Sages. If you're looking at one member of the Wardens that's really got to pull their weight in this next engagement, who are you looking? Is it the Rat with a big-time dunk or maybe some bombs from Pandacat? As Snatty actually gets that second cavalry charge forced out again, but who are you looking at?
Such a low cooldown on that cavalry charge, man. It feels criminal that he's got that back up again for a get-out-of-jail-free card, but for my money, the thing that needs to change sooner rather than later for the Wardens is the positioning from specifically Masked and Geno. It's been a couple of different times this game where when they're starting to position forward, when they're posturing for some of these major objectives or looking for some kind of invade, it's been Masked and it's been Geno that have been stepping a little bit too far forward and getting caught and leading to a larger fight where they lose a whole lot more and give up something significant to the Sages. If Masked and Geno can clean that up and they can get one good engage from Relentless One paired with Masked together, I think that's going to be their opportunity to get back into this one.
Some nice bombs there from Pandacat to take Privative and Snatty down low. Fear No Evil only catches one. It's the Ratatasker who immediately heads up into the tree. Privative falls quite low there. You can't forget, Nox is still a mage. Even though she's building all tanky-like, she's not going to have those ingrained protections that support characters like Guardians just naturally scale with. So Privative dropping low here. A lot of ultimates burned there on the side of the Sages. In return, the Kaolin Wardens are going to start up this Primal Fury. Here comes Snatty. Here comes Jengaru. Terror ultimate has been popped as well. Geno, a little bit too forward, slowed down by Jengaru, who finds the final shot. Pandacat turns it right back around.
Gets 2 beads as well, and now it's Griff having to dash on out of there as the Wardens kind of bit off more than they can chew. A good engage there will allow the Sages to pull this Fury.
Fast and Griff, no ultimates online, no swords to seal away. Sages grab the Primal Fury. I thought for a second Griff hit it with like an 800
maybe
and stole it, but no. Sages take down the Fury. Pyromancer online, so right-hand side looking for the Kaolin Wardens.
And a beautiful engage there from the Sages to make something out of nothing, because you're looking at this Sages composition, and I said it myself, it's usually this Jengaru Fear No Evil, or it's Privative looking for some kind of engage. But then you've got that third wild card of Snatty just jumping on a horse and stunning somebody unexpectedly. And Jengaru was perfectly there as he needed to be to follow up off of that. Meanwhile, Pandacat is just dead for standing there, apparently. A great engage from the Sages continues to mount their momentum, even as the Wardens continue to make some pretty uncharacteristic mistakes based on what we've seen from them.
And Pandacat's down for 33, 32, 31 seconds. You have to imagine the Sages have got to take advantage here of an easy 4v5. I mean, the only thing expended there was Privative throughout that ultimate in order to secure the kill onto Panda. So 20 more seconds, the Sages not really grouped up, not really pressing the issue. Kind of surprising here, Kaizo.
Yeah, they're thinking about this Fire Giant, though, and they will go ahead and pull that one. Relentless One is on the side, but it's going down so fast!
Oh, it is going down between the Merlin and the ADC. Gino runs in and immediately is put in the ground by Rinjaru, snatting in the back line. Horsey chasing another horse, but Mask able to come out on top and wins the Kentucky Derby in that one. It's just going to be a clean 1-0 fight. Pyromancer goes down, Fire Giant goes down, and the Athenian Sages in full control of this game number 2.
And they absolutely just jumped on their one moment, and that is my fault as a Chair 2 analyst for this cast to not have mentioned the fact that with a crit ADC and a level 20 Merlin, these objectives will be disappearing anytime the Sages go near them. And they grabbed that one without any contest, grabbing this middle Phoenix as well now. They're just walking up, instantly killing things, and then walking away before the Wardens are even ready for it. This is the first real aggression, real prime moment that they're capitalizing on for the Sages, and the Wardens seem to still be a little bit asleep at the wheel. They don't look ready for it.
And even then, that could have been maybe a potential re-engage at the middle lane Phoenix line for the Kaolin Wardens, but some great heads-up thought by Nehu, chucking out a couple of Merlin abilities, and immediately you saw Panda Cat get chunked down to 3/4. You saw Mass take a shot as well, and you just can't follow up off of that. So heads-up play there from the mid laner from the Athenian Sages. The middle lane Bird goes down for absolutely free between the might of Rinjaru chucking out these current autos and Nehu on this incredibly powerful Merlin. Right-hand side, though, Wardens are grouping up over here. Snatty looking to be the target, but what can the Wardens really accomplish by killing Snatty here?
They can definitely force him to use a third defensive cavalry charge in this exact position, but, meanwhile, the rest of the Sages are just shoving down this left lane. They've got a couple of people not going to be here on time. No tanks available for the time being for the Sages, though, will prevent them from just walking into this Phoenix and snatching it under the cover of darkness, but with Privative here to provide a little bit of that darkness, they might be able to do it anyway.
Privative looking at Mass, locks him down. Ooh, forces the beads. That's going to be tough for the jungler, for the Kaolin Wardens a little bit later on. Felt a little preemptive there from Mask. Meanwhile, Rinjaru's just wailing away on the left-hand Phoenix, absolutely chunking it. Privative throws out that Shadow Ball. Damage reduction on
Good damage.
Gino. Earth and Fury has been popped. A great lockdown there for Gino. Trades his life in return, but is there enough follow-up from the Wardens to make it worth it? Snatty runs forward, and Mass is back in the fight with a great 3-man ultimate, but down goes the jungler. Griff turns it back around, and Rinjaru finds a second. Make it a third.
And Rinjaru also finds a third here. Triple kill, make it 4 for Rinjaru in that fight as he takes down Griff to get the quadra kill. Wardens fall flat.
Yeah, I mean, you called it, man. It felt like the Kaolin Wardens were asleep at the wheel all game long. The Athenian Sages hit the gas pedal, and they never let off it. And I think the name of the game there is just you take one step too far forward against a Nox, and you're probably going to die.
And that fight from the Wardens there at the end was not a good one for them to be walking into. It was an amazing Fear No Evil there to cut off the front line from the back line on that siege. Terra gets a fantastic ultimate. Gino hits just about everybody with the Earth and Fury, but that Fear No Evil was placed perfectly in front of the Phoenix, preventing anybody from following up. And you were asking where the follow-up was. Well, they were covering their eyes. They were walking into walls. I mean, they just could not get in there to make an impact on that fight, allowing the Kernos to just free cast. And if you're going to be dropping a quadra kill on a siege, I think that it's probably pretty safe to say that things are looking up for you.
Well, I hate to say it, Kaizo, but I think I accidentally caster cursed us when I said I wanted this to go all three, because it certainly is going all three. The Kaolin Wardens and the Sages are going to run this one all the way to the end. But taking a look here, I mean, Nehu, 6-1 and 7, called his name all game long. Same thing goes for Rinjaru. The two main carries for the Kaolin Wardens just coming up in spades. And I mean, I could shout out any of them, right? I mean, yeah. Jangaru had some fantastic Fear No Evil, Snatty engaging when he had the cavalry charge, right? And then Privative, just some great roots and silences all game long. Felt like a real team win here.
And it really was just as simple as the Wardens played much more proactively that game. They just or excuse me, the sages. They took every opportunity to just get involved early on as they had that lead, but it was always these fear no evils were so clutch, and Privative was making so much space with this Nox, which traditionally it's very difficult to position yourself in such a way that you can get relevant crowd control off while also keeping yourself out of the damage that's coming your way. Privative weaved his way in through there very effectively, made sure that he wasn't in any threat while also putting that those relevant cooldowns down. I think that this is a composition that if you don't get it banned away from you, you absolutely can just run back and potentially run away with this game number 3.
Well, here in the final set here of the SEC in week number 1, we're getting treated to something special. A game number 3 between the Wardens and the Sages. That'll come at you in just a second. Stick around. Howdy, folks. Welcome back into the SMITE Challenger Circuit, Week 1, day numero tres. It's Dimes, it's Kaizo, and we're in game number 3 of the Athenian Sages and the Kaolin Wardens.
And coming off of the back of a much more improved performance as well, because it has been 2 games where one team was in the lead, both early games, and only this time around did we see that actually translate into something meaningful in the late game. Those Hunbat's ults were phenomenal, and that was ideally, in my eyes, the key component preventing the enemy team from being able to play that last fight at all and driving forward that Renjuru quadra kill. I'd like to see that Hunbat's either taken away or dealt with in a different way, because that certainly did put a very significant impact on the landscape of that game number 2.
Well, we can find out right now, Kaizo, heading into picks and bans for game number 3. And it just kind of irregular lacklusterness out of the Kaolin Wardens. I feel like that's a team with some personalities. You know, you got Panda Cat, you got Mass, and just kind of falling flat in game number 2. You know, we talked about it multiple times, both Mass and Gino just out of position, just straight up, like not much else to say, like straight up just too far forward and getting picked out by a great CC chain from the Sages. Hopefully reining it in, maybe a little bit more discipline here in game number 3 as Thor, Marty, Terra, and let me guess, it's going to be the Mercury from the Sages.
Terra is a change up there, so it's at least some kind of adaptation as we see the emoji taken away as well. And, you know, for what it's worth, Dimes, I do think that I would much rather see Masked and Gino being too far forward and playing too aggressively, as opposed to the problem that the Sages had in game number 1 where they were playing too passively. I think it's a lot easier to make the adaptation of, you know, back up, rein it in, play a little bit more carefully than the mental gymnastics that the Sages must have done game 1 to game 2 of like moving forward, capitalizing on their opportunities, and trying to make something out of the lead that they've been generating.
Kind of surprised here that the number 1 pick in both games, Guan Yu, still left on the table. Wardens thinking about it here. It's going to be the Guan Yu. Not a surprise. You've said it countless times now. Best solo laner in the game, provides everything, right?
Pretty
Healing,
much.
shred, initiation, escape. But this is what I was about to say. Hercules, also one of the strongest laners in the game, so far unseen in games 1 and 2. I was going to question why, but now we can talk about him being picked up for the Sages.
And I do think he has a very positive lane matchup into the Guan Yu, capable of bullying him out, especially if you pair him with something that does a whole lot of damage. He's got all the crowd control in the world for that 2v2. You just need somebody to pour in a little bit of additional damage and take down the Guan Yu. Not to mention, being able to stop the Talon Assault with that driving strike is always going to be a positive if you're trying to play against this Guan Yu. I think Hercules is, for my money, the second best solo laner in the game right now, and then everybody else it's leagues below, man. I think these are the 2 best guys you've got. So if you're lining up against the Guan Yu, I think the Sages have definitely done everything they can to give themselves tools to play against it.
Karnanos locked for the Sages, and on the left-hand side of your screen, the Wardens pick up the Ratatasker again. They reprised that from game 2. And then something that's been banned out in games 1 and 2, it's the Habwa. Now, we have some mental gymnastics to do here. Habwa could go mid, could go in the jungle, which then tells us the Rat could go solo. But if the Habwa is going in the jungle, then he's probably going solo. So we've got a bit of question that needs a bit of an answer in these last 2 picks here, as no surprise, Merlin going 3 for 3 in this set.
Yeah, and after the performance Nehu had in game number 2, and honestly how good Panda Cat looked on it in game number 1 as well, I think that this is a good call to take this one away, although I do think that it's worth noting with Hebo, Ratatasker, and Guan Yu, that's likely to be Hebo mid, Ratatasker jungle, Guan Yu solo. The only flex potential I really see there is Guan Yu potentially trying to find his way into the support role. I've seen weirder stuff, man. I've seen Ratatasker solo, and that didn't look great, and maybe we're looking for a little more spice in this one, but ideally, these are going to be your jungle, your mid, and your solo laner, which means they didn't necessarily have to pick the Merlin there, but I do also think it's worth grabbing it before it got banned away, because if you leave that open, Wardens will absolutely make sure that Nehu doesn't get to play that one a second time around.
Blessedly, the Hun bot's off the table for the Wardens, so not going back into the hands of Jangaru. That is a huge component of that Game 2 victory. Serket is picked up, and last game, I got to correct you a little bit here, Kaizo. You said that when I thought of Mass, I thought of Serket. Actually, what I said was when I think of Jangaru, I think of Serket.
You got it, yep.
And right here, my crystal ball is once again accurate as Cupid is picked up. Now, if this was the Jade Dragons era, I would say Panda Cat loves his Cupid, but it's not. We've moved past that. Panda Cat's in the middle lane, so Griff will be taking that Cupid into the ADC role, and Horus picked up now, likely for support. Yes.
One would hope, and I gotta talk about this Cupid, man, because this is the holy grail of ADC picks into this Athenian Sages composition. Cupid, not a character we've seen pretty much at all recently for pretty good reasons. Stuff like the Kurnanos, like the Marty Chorus, like the Ishtar, traditionally thought to be a better attack damage carry right now. But the Fields of Love Ultimate into what the Sages have going on is the single best tool you could have picked here. I'm talking it prevents Hercules from doing his combo, Kurnanos can't dash out of it, no innate CC immunity, Merlin can't flicker out of it, no innate CC immunity, Serket can't use either of her two movement abilities and no innate CC immunity. This is a phenomenal pick from Griff, and for my money, he is now the player to watch in this game just because he has successfully found the chink in the armor for the Athenian Sages.
With Geb the final lock-in, we've got the cast, the actors are ready. Let's pull the curtain on game number 3. The Wardens take on the Sages here in the battleground of the gods. I just want to mention the Jing Wei band there. I know we're past P's and B's, but just worth a mention, a little bit of kind of piqued my interest there as Griff is using potentially, for my money, as you like to say, Kaiza, the best skin for Cupid.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, which I've also said a couple of times here, those are, we call those crutch words on the cast. I'm not trying to say that, but okay, that is a pretty cute skin. See, I'm a little bee guy Cupid player. I think that the bee skin is very cute, and I love all of the bee puns, despite the fact that if I heard Spooky use one of them, I might strangle him.
Sure.
But I do think that
this
is a pretty good pick as well, and particularly because it makes you want to watch Griff even more. I don't think that he's going to likely get the better end of the laning phase here. I should make that pretty clear. He's likely to get bullied out by Kurnanos, specifically Renjaru on the Kurnanos, who, again, looked phenomenal in the second game, got that quadra kill as well. It's going to be a rough time here, and it should almost always be favoring the Athenian Sages once these supports leave this lane. But it's really after Griff rotates into these team fights that we're going to be seeing a lot more value placed on him. Up until that point, you kind of shift your attention around, but definitely once we get to that stage, keep your eyes on this guy.
You know, your eyes are on this duo lane for very valid reasons, but my eyes kind of hover towards this mid lane matchup where both Mask and Panda Cat have picked up the blink on Hufwa and Ratatasker. I mean, there's so much aggression between those two players. It seems like First Blood, if it doesn't happen right now, is going to happen in mid. Gino dropping low, already still low from the buff clearing. Meanwhile, Nehu taking a shot as well, flicker away. It's going to be aggression on pretty much all sides of the map as Relentless One and Snatty were also trading punches in the solo lane.
And Relentless One, obviously, for the most part, going to be on the losing end of these engagements. Can't get too close to this tower as Sandy unfortunately misses canceling out the Tallow Assault. But the aggression in the mid lane is pretty consistent with what you would expect, right? Like, Serket does have those very strong early game tools. The crowd control, the 120 base damage on the Deathbane, very effective. But Hebo is kind of an abomination at all stages of the game. The knock-up is incredibly powerful, has very low cooldowns on that water cannon, which does a whole bunch of damage. It's likely to prevent Nehu from really playing too aggressive, but yeah, Jingara is going to go in here.
And Panda Cat is totally out of mana, not like he'd have movement abilities anyway, but Jangaru finds the taunts, doesn't find the Deathbane, and Nehu a little bit off the mark there with the blink in on Merlin. Oh, so low! Relentless One takes out Snatty in the solo lane, and that's going to be a quick First Blood for the Kaolin Wardens. Meanwhile, Privative drops low. Griff puts the finishing touches on that one, and the Wardens succeeding across the map here in game number 3. They're looking to put this one in the books quick.
and getting off to their first real lead in the early game, at least, for this entire set. It was the Sages leading in game 1 and then kind of squandering it later on, and then the Sages also developing a pretty sizable lead in game 2, which was taken by force by the Kaolin Wardens. They're finally, Jengaru just picked up the blue buff on accident while trying to fight against Relentless One, so does at least manage to take that one away, but he's definitely probably seeing some unkind things in comms right now because he doesn't get that speed buff.
What kind of unkind things, Kaizo?
I will decline to respond to that.
Do you like being employed?
Usually, yes. I find that to be pretty effective.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Meanwhile, these junglers hitting level 4, approaching level 5 here, and I mean, if the Sages are going to get anything going, once again, I mean, my eyes just are immediately pulled to Jengaru on this Circuit. I feel like, I mean, I've been doing this for a couple years now, and every time I've seen Jengaru, it's almost been success after success after success on this Circuit. He can pilot this character to great effect, and especially, I feel like we didn't really talk about or touch on this Geb too much. We don't see him all that often, but when we do, always makes an impact. Jengaru is just trying to dive the back line and look for that Geb shield pretty much every time.
And we didn't actually get to talk about the Geb yet, but that is actually the one thing that kind of stands out for me as something that I don't quite understand. The rest of it, the Athenian Sages wanted a whole lot of aggression. It'll put some onto Priv here. Mast will go down, but Mast will get a kill. Priv will at least manage to live. I don't really know what the Geb is supposed to do. You usually pick Geb against Circuit to counter some of that damage on the ultimate, cleanse some of that crowd control, but there's not really any one good source of crowd control that you're looking to cleanse if you're on the side of the Athenian Sages. Maybe you could argue you're trying to get away from that Fields of Love, but honestly, if you're getting mezzed by it and then getting Geb shielded, it's done its job anyway. It's already forced out cooldowns in a way that you wouldn't ordinarily want to use them. The only thing I can really think of is that it's a very effective counter-engage tool if Panda Cat goes a little bit too aggressive, but other than that, I'm not really sure what they're going for.
Jaru might be in a spot of trouble here. Griff dashes in, but here comes Mast. Beads used, Wild Hunt already used on that shield buff, and gone. Renjaru just disappeared off the map, and I mean, we're talking 4 kills in 5 minutes. This is a Kaolin Wardens that is... I mean, like I said earlier, they're just trying to put the finishing touches on game number 3 and take home week 1 pretty quick here. Mast blinks in on a Jengaru, a blink in as well by Panda Cat. Knock up doesn't connect on a Jengaru. And like we mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast, Kaizo, I mean, this is a sprint. This is 5 weeks of quick action qualifying for the SMITE Masters land that's coming up in June. It is, I mean, it is pedal to the metal from the very start. Otherwise, you're just out of the race.
And I would argue that that's much more along the lines of what the Kaolin Wardens have been doing here, especially in this game number 3, as they have gotten themselves off to a pretty sizable lead.
Oh my.
And it is really Panda Cat that is the standout performer for me, at least early on here. Doesn't even have to do a whole lot. It's just the fact that he has the blink that is indicative to me of what the Kaolin Wardens plan to do. They're not going to let the Athenian Sages sit back. They're not going to allow them to just play the map as they would like to. The Wardens are coming to the Sages, and they're coming to Snatty right now.
Oh, and Snatty with just a lick of HP. Mast going to put the final blow onto that one. A 3-0-1 for the level 7 jungler. There's a few people in the SMITE competitive scene that you get a bad feeling in your gut when they start getting rolling, and Mast is one of those.
Yeah, these momentum players that seem like they don't drop anything at all if you give them a lead to work with, and Mast has certainly gotten one, like you said, 3-0-1, about a level ahead of Jengaru on the Circuit, who most notably hasn't seen a whole lot of primarily effective interaction so far, has mostly just been farming out the map, and has the tools required to get involved if she should need to early on, but I mean, it's going to be difficult against something like, again, Griff on this Cupid can just drop down all of the cripple at his feet and then prevent Jengaru from getting involved. If he gets too close to Panda Cat, he gets knocked up and takes a good 1,200 damage for his troubles. It's going to be difficult for Jengaru to find a target in this one when really the only place you can look is solo lane, and Sandy's kind of getting bodied over here.
Gino looking to go on Jengaru. And, you know, the more, I mean, we're not even 10 minutes into this game now, but the more this game progresses, the more I'm really seeing the impact that you were talking about of this Cupid. I mean, like you said, Jengaru on this Circuit is hyper mobile. It's the entire point of the character, and Griff can immediately cancel that out. And then Gino has so much peel on this Horus, and there's self-peel with Mass, being able to go up in the air. Panda Cat's got the crushing wave to get out of danger. Jengaru certainly has his work cut out for him here on this very safe Kaolin Warden squad.
Yeah, the Wardens do have to keep up this pace, though, make no mistake about it. If they let this one go late, Nehu's going to get online with this Merlin. Snetty will become very difficult to deal with, and while Geb is fine early on, becomes much more relevant in the later stages once you get some levels into that stone shield. Makes it very difficult to play around those health thresholds, as you can apply a large amount of effective health to a target at a moment's notice. Wardens are going to have to play very aggressive, and they don't seem bothered by it at all as they continue to look for these invades.
Blue buff coming up online. Looks like Mass is going to take a play at it. Snatty and Jengaru are here as well. But keep an eye on Ney, who's making the rotation in. Panda Cat's not going to be here in time. Up into the tree goes Mass, able to escape. The boulder doesn't connect with Scratch That. Connects with a Relentless One, but just for a tick of damage there. Pull back in on a Relentless One, but Cavalry charges online, so how much trouble is this Guan Yu really in? Ooh, does pull the blink off of Jengaru for the Cavalry charge. That's a great trade for the solo lane.
And that seems to be the Guan Yu playstyle. We saw Snatty do it in Game 2, and now we're seeing Relentless One do it in Game number 3. Cavalry Charge keeps you so safe. It is so long duration that you can really use it to get yourself just about anywhere you need to be going and prevent any real follow-up from occurring while it's going on. So Relentless One stays a little bit longer at a little bit lower HP than he ordinarily would have, forcing out some cooldowns from Jengaru on this Circuit and preventing him from playing aggressive anywhere else. Without that blink, and with a 2-level deficit now onto Mast, it's going to be very difficult for him to find a target in a game where it already doesn't really leave him spoiled for choice. He's 4 levels down on Panda Cat on this Hebo, 2 levels down on Griff on the Cupid. And with a character like Circuit, where you'd ideally like to get off to the kind of start that Mast has on this Ratatosker, being able to find some value on this pick is going to be much more difficult as the game progresses.
Just ticking over 10 minutes here. Kaolin Warden still 5-0, blanking the Athenian Sages in the kill category. Now, Kaizo, we saw Ratatasker in the solo lane. We don't get to see him all that often. Walk me through the Acorn choice here. I mean, what do you go in the jungle? What do you go in solo? And why has Mass pick up this Acorn?
We'll see Privative get the ult forced out real quick, but Renjaru will answer back. Nehu, meanwhile, somehow manages to kill Panda Cat, but based on where that took place, Dimes, I don't think that was really a choice that Nehu had so much as Panda Cat trying to force that one. But
sure,
going back to your question here, the Thistlethorn Acorn, this is the one that gives you some additional acorns, makes that ability, your third ability, your stun, a little bit wider, a little bit more reliable to hit at long range, or when you're point blank, gives you a wider targeter, so you're more likely to land at least 3 of them required to get the stun. Gives you a whole burst of damage. This is your traditional assassin builds power, builds penetration, and one-shots you with abilities kind of build. Now, there is also the option that people have been playing around with a little bit more, where you can go crit, but we're not going to see that. That is very traditional assassin ability damage that just eliminated Nehu from the battleground.
Yeah, Mass didn't need a tick of crit there to take out Nehu in the middle lane. Blue buff finally, blessedly, goes the way of the Athenian Sages there. But meanwhile, dropping so low is Jengaru able to leap out, but that global ultimate is not going to connect. A great blink away there from the Circuit Privative between a rock and a hard place, or I guess is a rock and a hard place, and is just a tick away here from falling himself. Couple more shots there from Panda Cat's going to find that one. Mask goes a little too deep onto Snatty, who was kind of wailing away on this 1-3 Hercules here, finding the first kill for the solo laner there. And finally, a little bit of life, some return from the Athenian Sages here.
And it's once again the Wardens playing so incredibly aggressive in this jungle. They didn't get the blue buff invade, but that's because they had much more nefarious intent on other parts of the map, just looking for, honestly, pretty much anybody to step up near them so that they can aggress onto them. For what it's worth, though, the Sages definitely did answer back in kind. Getting that kill onto, it was Mast, I believe you said, for Snatty is a very worthwhile shutdown for him. Gives them a lot of gold as a team, as well as making sure that Snatty can get a little bit more back into this lane. And, you know, you would think 1-3-0 versus 1-0-3, it would be Snatty that would be behind, but it's actually Relentless One that finds himself at about a level deficit despite all the attention that's been paid to this side of the map, despite all of the blue buff invades and rotations that he's been getting. Snatty's managing to keep himself afloat, if nothing else, and that could be bad news if you're a Wardens fan.
No major objective yet falling down on the map. Every tier 1 tower still stands. Gold Fury online, still around. Pyromancer, same thing could be said there. So even though much more action around the map from these junglers and mid laners and supports. No real openings being made here. As I eat my words, the Kaolin Wardens start up this Pyromancer. Jangaru and Privative are here. Snatty over the wall with the boulder. Kaolin Warden's going to take down the Pyromancer in a coin flip. They'll come out on top. Gino here with ultimate, so an easy escape if necessary. No chase down here from the Sages, but wide open door for the Gold Fury.
Yeah, they're going to use that opportunity to translate their attention to the left-hand side. Meanwhile, Griff taking an engagement with Renjaru. Looks like they both used their ultimate abilities and a relic down for each one of them. This is a deep flank from Jangaru.
And Griff might pay for it, but a great dash away. Perfectly timed by Griff. Don't even know if that was intentional, just perfectly timed as Renjaru, Jangaru, and Privative combined for that shield buff, but no Gold Fury. In fact, going to be started up by the Kaolin Wardens here. So the Sages not taking advantage of that power play. The Wardens wailing away on the Gold Fury, put that one in the ground, put a little more coin in their pocket, and the Sages have nothing to say to that one.
And this is unfortunately shades of game number 1, man, where the Sages are just playing a little bit too far back to step up to these major objectives. The Wardens made their rotation over and were ready to defend, but since the Sages didn't even try to play aggressive there, didn't even try to use the words you used were power play on that side of the map, they just take the opportunity for themselves and now find themselves pretty comfortably in the lead. It's been a very small one up until this point, but now that they've gotten both major objectives on either side of the map, the Pyromancer and that Gold Fury, that's a lot of global gold to be giving themselves, and kind of trains their attention to some of these players as opposed to the health bars of the objectives. You can see Jangaru looking for something on the left-hand side of the map. There's not a whole lot for them to do until those objectives spawn, so it is at least going to benefit the Sages that they get some time to farm up, to catch up, maybe relax a little bit more into this one.
With games 1 and 2 being so dominated by the junglers, I think the slash lines in game number 3 here really tell the tale. 0, 0, and 1 for Jangaru. On the flip side, 4, 1, and 2 for Mass. Just making more things happen straight up across the map, finding more kills, a little bit more setup as well, and Jangaru just not finding the entrances. And like you've said it before, it's a combination of Griff being ungankable, Pandacat having that crushing wave escape, Mask being able to go up on a tree, Relentless One jumping on a horse. I mean, I could literally say for each player on the Kaolin Wardens exactly how they're going to get out of that Serket's ultimate or Serket's aggression, and just real tough scenes for Jangaru on the side of the Athenian Sages.
Meanwhile, Mast has done an excellent job of finding his opportunities and even forcing some on a Snatty, and it looks like they're going to force it on a Nehu as well.
Flicker away from Nehu, crushing wave just to close the distance. Jangaru getting caught in the wave as well. Relentless One trying to finish off Nehu. Mask is going to walk in, say thank you very much with that auto attack, and take down the mid laner for the Athenian Sages. And now this tier 1 tower is looking rather tasty. Kaolin Wardens instead opting to rotate around this left-hand side, try to find maybe one more pick before they commit to a major objective. It's just going to be a free, easy pick on the mid laner for nothing.
And something that doesn't get said enough is Snetty might be in very big trouble here. Gets the beads forced out, if nothing else. When you're this far behind, and I say this far, it's only a couple thousand, but you feel every drop of it if you're the Athenian Sages. Vision's a little bit more hard to come by, man. They don't have a whole lot of red dots on this map to tell them where the Wardens are, so they didn't know that Mass was looking for something in left. They don't know that they're going into mid either.
Oh, what a great ult by Griff to lock down Privative. The entire Kaolin Warden squad dunking down on the immobile Geb. Geb's a pretty mobile character, but in that case, crippled to death. So down goes the support for the Sages. The Kaolin Wardens blew quite a few ultimates on taking down the support, though. Snatty is now in a tough spot here. Is going to find a stun in just a second off that heart bomb. Great lockdown from the Wardens. A 2-0 swing from this Order squad. And Relentless One, in the meantime, is just soloing Nehu with Panda Cat as backup, a 3-for-0 for the Kaolin Wardens, and the world is their oyster.
Their oyster seems to be a fire giant, or at least that's what's in front of them right now, as we see Renjaru split pushing the left-hand side of the map. It looks like Jangaru is also just going to get an invade off. Still even going to be showing face around this fire giant, and the Wardens have not stopped from the start of this game. They have been playing so aggressively, forcing all of these opportunities from the word go. It hasn't been an answer so far from the Sages. I'd like to see them try to jump on this opportunity before it gets out of the control, because, again, they have a better late game, but they have to get there in order to make use of it. If they don't find some fight that allows them to make use of the fact that they've at least got some tools right now, the Wardens are just going to continue to eat the entire map. They're going to get the Zoni Fury, Pyromancer also up and available for them. If the Sages just let the Wardens collect on the entire map that they have before them, it's going to get to the point where it's too far down for them to defend this one. They've got to stake their claim at some point here. Only problem is, Dimes, that now they have the Fire Giant to contend with as well.
Oh, Nehu might be in a tough spot here. Mast and Panda Cat, if they catch someone, they just explode. Relentless One and Gino diving, meanwhile, in the back line on a Privative, but can't catch out the Geb as they did in the last teamfight engagement. Pyromancer online, but Griff notably in this left-hand side chunking away the tower, so not as much shred potential for major objectives as, never mind, I guess. Pyromancer goes down to the side of the Kaolin Wardens.
Good enough.
They get a firebomb in their pocket. They take a left-hand tier 1 tower, and Griff is still going, which why not?
Yeah.
The Kaolin Wardens pressing the gas pedal in the middle lane here. Might as well grab 2 tier 2 towers for your time with this Fire Giant buff ticking away, adding some extra objective shred as well. 4 members of the Athenian Sages make it 5 as Snatty makes his way to the middle lane here to defend the tier 2.
And that is kind of the MO for this Fire Giant, where, you know, you're 3,000, you're 4,000 gold in the lead. You've still only got it about 18 minutes into the game when they drop that one down. That's not a, we're going to end the game Fire Giant. That's not a, this could be a Phoenix Siege Fire Giant. The entire goal of this siege and this last several minutes for the Wardens has been, let's collect as much global gold on the map as we can so that with the next Fire Giant, we can look to do a little bit something more. And they've definitely turned that 4,000 gold lead into about an 8,000 now by collecting those tier 2 towers in left and mid lane. Tier 1 was also available before Griff started doing some dirty work over there. And this is the point, Dimes, where the Sages have to find this next fight or they're going to be out of this game. Whether that takes place in the Fire Giant pit or in the Phoenix Siege, they have to show up to something and set their flag down and at least try to defend on it. Because the longer this game goes, if this continues with the same pace, it's only going to be the Wardens getting even more benefit from these engagements.
All of the Athenian towers stripped off the map here. Kaolin Wardens making great use of that Fire Giant buff. Just a second ago, Gold Fury also going the way of the Kaolin Wardens. Didn't really get to chat about that. So every major objective going straight to the side of the Order Squad. And we've reached that gentle precipice, that 10,000 gold range, about 9 now, where it is really on the Kaolin Wardens to throw in a big way. I mean, the Athenian Sages have a pretty decent defense comp, I'd say. You know, Nehu on this Merlin, Renjaru with the Wild Hunt, Snatty with the Boulder. Phoenix defenses go their way, but it's really going to be this next Fire Giant that cracks it open.
Yeah, and it is a much better jungle fight for the Wardens than a lane fight, I would say. Typically, these semi-global and global ultimates, I'm looking at things like the Ratatosker, the Thor, the Thanatos, gets a lot more value in the jungle where you can use them unexpectedly. You don't know where they're coming from or where they're going. Whereas on these siege defenses, if we end up getting there, the Wardens are going to have a little bit more difficult time using the not Gino to the Skies ultimate and that through the Cosmos from Mast as well. Whereas right now, I mean, it feels so impossible for the Sages to step up into the jungle. They have no vision anywhere on this map. They don't know where anybody on the Wardens is unless they step up to these minion waves. Trying to even make your way to this Fire Giant would have been a near insurmountable task if you're in a red uniform.
The Athenian Sages straight up throwing their hands in the air saying, this is all yours, Wardens, take it, and we'll take our chances at the Phoenix line. Meanwhile, the ADC and the jungler, Jangaru and Renjaru, pushing up that left-hand side. trying to shove some minions under the left-hand Phoenix, forcing a back here from the Kaolin Wardens. So buying just a little bit of time for themselves so the Athenian Sages can make a full-hearted defense here under the Phoenixes. Clear out some camps, buy those last crucial items, maybe pick up a power pot if you can swing it. Really try to make this last stand effective.
And we said earlier, inevitable was the word that felt pretty apropos for the way that the Wardens have been playing, and I think that fits here in game number 3 as well. 10,000 gold in the lead, just about no mistakes up until this point. You could argue maybe a misstep here or there as Master Peacat end up overextending and dropping, but otherwise they've been playing very clean, very clinical, and it looks like now they're ready to step on the gas.
Gino into the skies, where are the Kaolin Wardens going to dunk down under the Phoenix line? Relentless One leading the charge here. A boulder runs through the minions, only catches the tanks of the Kaolin Wardens. So the Wardens able to back off, use that Fire Giant healing.
That's weird.
Using the item buff as well. Tell me, what's weird, Kaizo?
I thought for sure, like, you could even tell by the way I was talking, I thought that was about to be crazy town, the way that they were engaging with that Horus ult, but now that's just a cooldown they no longer have available and have had no real success as a result of it. They're going to have to walk in the old-fashioned way.
Well, Panda Cat with the Crushing Wave online. Eyes on him to absolutely delete a backline member. Relentless One with the Cavalry Charge also leading the way here. Privative locked down, knocked up, and put in the ground. Able to get off that Cataclysm just in time. But Griff opening up the Phoenix on the left-hand side. Mast in the backline. Saving the Fields of Love for a 2-man lockdown. Relentless One out. Gino goes back in against 4 members. Wild Hunt not able to catch anybody, but the Phoenix does fall in return. Mast locked up, back inside. Snatty locked down. Panda Cat, not enough damage. Griff wailing away. Left-hand side, Phoenix has fallen in the middle lane, is soon to follow.
Panda Cat still has that Crushing Wave available, so still that big burst of damage possible if the Athenian Sages try to step up too far. Middle Phoenix also goes down here. No Mast ultimate available, but they do still have that To the Skies once more. They're going to go in on Snatty.
Snatty, boulder down. Snatty push away, pulls 2 members of the Wardens into the throne room. Is Snatty able to make it out? Yes, with that massive Hercules heal. But meanwhile, this Fire Giant just ticking away. Relentless One locking down Panda Cat. Crushing Wave used defensively there from Panda Cat. Big time defense here from the Athenian Sages, losing 2 of their birds. They have to keep this final one above the ground.
And Snatty, incredible peel there to keep Rinjaru alive. That was absolutely a necessary driving strike to preserve the Kernanos, but the Wardens aren't done just yet.
Knock up onto Snatty. Meanwhile, moving in is Nehu, who steps so far forward from Merlin and immediately falls to the water hands from Panda Cat. In the sky, Gino crashing down, not making effective use of that ultimate for a 2nd time in a row. And just question mark there why Nehu had to move so far forward. Trades his life for the next 35 seconds or so. A 5v4 power play for the Kaolin Wardens. Snatty off the mark there with that Earthbreaker. Mast leading the way here. Gino looking for a way in. Relentless One, Cavalry Charge back online. 2-man Cataclysm, 2-man Wild Hunt, but the Fields of Love are down. Jengaru takes out not Gino. Mast forced out as well. Boulder comes through on Relentless One with just a tick of HP remaining. Panda Cat throwing out that carpet. It is a full-on retreat call for the Kaolin Wardens after a perfectly executed series of ultimates from the Sages.
And that's exactly what we were talking about earlier. This Geb is here for the counter-engage specifically. He waits for the dash-in from Gino, immediately drops that Cataclysm. That does big damage, big percentage HP damage to these frontliners that are too far forward. And now off of that defense, man, the momentum is in the hands of the Athenian Sages. They're going to pull the Fire Giant.
Griff looking for a big Heart Bomb, big crit strike. The rest of the team is here, though. The Kaolin Wardens have grouped up, minus Gino on the Horus, who's going to be in the ground for another 10 seconds or so. Relentless One charging forward, Mast in the air, Snatty half HP, Privative falling so low, and the shield has been used. No CC immunity available. Mast still on that World Tree, finally comes down. In goes Panda Cat, Crushing Wave doesn't connect any valuable targets. Rinjaru puts down the mid laner for the Kaolin Wardens. And a misstep there from the mid laner going so aggressive.
And it's not done quite yet. It looks like the Wardens still want to get this one. Know that 2 people have backed, so they're going up to the skies here, trying to chase out the rest of the Sages.
Oh, the Titan dropping so low, the minions pouring into the throne room. Nehu being knocked up by Gino, who's returned Relentless One. Boulder comes out there from Snatty, moving forward. Nehu is the target. Who cares about the Hercules? Gino putting the Merlin in the ground. 2-man Fields of Love only locks down Primitive. Snatty able to make it out of dodge, and once again, the minions pouring into the throne room, laying into the Titan with their fire arrows. Jengaru low, Jengaru still alive for just a moment. Relentless One with that cavalry charge takes out the jungler. The Titan is at a quarter HP, falling low. Renjaru gets a big shot back onto the ADC for the Wardens, and now it is just a cluster in the throne room. Bass has been forced out. Renjaru gets peeled away as once again Snatty comes through big time with a driving strike. The minions, not enough, a reset of the Titan, and the Wardens just can't put the finishing touches on this one.
An incredible, miraculous defense there from the Sages, who had to run away from the Fire Giant pit with their tails between their legs. But despite that fact, despite everything seeming like the scales were finally tipping in favor of the Wardens in such a fashion that they would be able to just outright end the game there, they managed to cling on to the Titan, which was very, very low, but will start to heal now that this left Phoenix has respawned. Middle Bird due to respawn as well, but the big part of this entire engagement, Dimes, is that because they managed to keep those Phoenixes alive, because they had to back up and defend their base, no one from the Sages was willing to step up into that Fire Giant pit. It may not be EFG, but the big boy does still go down in favor of the Wardens.
Oh man, just what a trepidatious spot to be in here from the Athenian Sages, with a middle bird that just respawned, a left-hand bird that's slowly healing up, a Titan at half HP, like you said, is currently climbing back to 100% health. But with Fire Giant wrapped around the entirety of the waist of the Kaolin Wardens, and the Fury about to go into their pocket as well, it seems like one well-placed Horus ultimate is an easy bird, maybe even a pick for the Kaolin Wardens. Who are you looking at for the Athenian Sages to come through big? If it's just one member, or is it just going to have to be a perfect succession of CC lockdown ultimates once again?
It's got to start with Nehu playing more carefully and positioning a little bit more effectively in these team fights. You called his jersey as stepping a little bit too far forward in that siege and right. Absolutely not an option here for the Athenian Sages. Nehu needs to keep himself safe, keep himself away from specifically Panda Cat, so that he doesn't catch any of that stray damage and end up getting poked out. It doesn't look like the Wardens are going to wait any longer.
Mass coming in from the middle lane. In goes Gino, Fields of Love, just to create space to try to take out this bird. And it's going to work. Gino falling so low, Mask up into the Cosmos to get away as well. The Boulder comes through. Nehu comes through big as well. And the left-hand bird still alive. Middle lane pushed out as well. So far, a successful defense here from the Athenian Sages. Panda Cat still got that blink, still got that crushing wave online, and as long as that ultimate is in the hands of Panda Cat, Kaolin Wardens have a shot.
And here's the difference between the 10.3 patch we're playing on here and Smite you've seen in the past. No more brawling means full value from all of that healing. Gino doesn't even need to go back and reset, can just stick around and go straight up to the skies.
4-1 split, junglers in the middle lane. Horus joining it to make it a 2-1. The entire Sages team rotates to the middle lane to try to even up this fight a little bit. Gino able to escape the Wild Hunt. Relentless One dashes out, no problem as well. Left-hand side, Phoenix still alive. Middle Phoenix still alive as well. Gino comes back in. Excavate connects with 2. But meanwhile, the Hunter for the Athenian Sages, Renjaru, finds a massive pick onto Gino of the Kaolin Wardens. He's going to be in the ground for another 50 seconds. And once again, the Wardens are turned away from the door of the Athenian Sages.
Yeah, the turtling from the Sages is so impressive here. They're moving back and forth according to where Gino's taking everybody with the Horus ult, and the counter engage again has just been so good for them. The Gebel, not used in that particular engagement, but has been very effective. This time around, it was largely Nehu and Renjaru doing a whole lot of work on the engage from the Kaolin Wardens. Once the To the Skies landed, there was immediately a Nehu Void combo waiting at the bottom of that. You can see ahead of time where Gino's going to be taking everybody out, so Nehu uses that opportunity to set up a little bit of damage on the bottom, make sure everybody at least doesn't land with a shield, has to land with their only health bar to work with. and Ranjara got a great wild hunt to separate that fight and prevent the rest of the Wardens from stepping far enough forward to actually put any realistic damage onto this Phoenix. Sages are playing really well, man. Snatty's even getting a lot of good value out of these push and pull combos to displace some members and disconnect the flow of the Kaolin Wardens. I think that they're actually playing this just about as well as they can, and despite the fact that the Fire Giant Siege should have been a good shot for the Kaolin Wardens to re-break into this base and take down one of those weakened Phoenixes, they cling on to both of them, and now we're back to just the standard Fire Giant dance.
Fire Giant spawning on the map. And with the 3 birds online and 100% Titan health, the Sages able to leave the threshold of their home and push into this Fire Giant pit. This is going to be a game-changing fight right here. This might even be the final fight of the game. Gino dashes in aggressively, gets caught, half HP, gets taunted by Jengaru. Meanwhile, Relentless One counter-initiating on the right side. Mask in the air, Mask looking for a big 3-man dunk. Relentless One takes down the Hunter for the Athenian Sages in the back line. Relentless One able to escape. Nehu dropping low. Gino forcing out 2 crucial members of the Athenian Sages. Primitive and Snatty escape with just a sliver of HP. And it is 5 healthy members, minus Relentless One, who's got those heals online. Pushing down the right-hand side, takes out the right-hand Phoenix. And where's this in the skies going? Is it going to mid lane? Is it going back to Fire Giant for this enhanced FG? And maybe, finally, with this enhanced Fire Giant, the Kaolin Wardens will be able to shove down mid and left lane.
Sages don't look done, though. They are on the way in, trying to see how long it will take the Wardens to bring that one down, but that Eye of the Jungle that Griff has alongside the critical strike chance will make sure that that goes down very fast. And Nehu is up a creek here, man. He's got to get away from Mast.
Oh, not again. Nehu can't drop again because of positioning, able to escape with the help of that Geb shield. Gino leading the way for his team. Mask right behind him here. Crushing wave, just coming back off cooldown. Gino, the recipient of a Jengaru ultimate. That's going to be down for the team fight. Middle lane, Phoenix dropping low. Griff caught out there. Relentless One forced away as well. Middle lane, Bird still stands. The Sages once again showing their chops with this base defense.
Yeah, the Sages are so impressive here, man. The Guan Yu ult not deterring them. They still step up, but this Bird is so low. They've got to play perfectly.
Heals from the Guan Yu and the Fire Giant coming through here. Fields of Love separates the fight. Middle lane, Phoenix goes down. Mask in the back line. Big shot onto Ranjara there, who's forced out on this Kernunos. No ultimates online for the Sages. Just Gino with the in the skies here. Relics looking weak on both sides. It's just going to be a straight up scrap. Who can ever press their buttons better is going to come out on top of this one. Look your eyes on Panda Cat here. Big knock-up or big water hand's going to set the table here. Gino, Relentless One, playing the frontliner. Excavate comes out, catches a couple priority members of the Wardens. And once again, turned away.
And they're going to back up and get some more of that healing going down. Relentless One alongside Gino and Griff. 3 different people to keep them sustained up alongside that Fire Giant buff. And with this Phoenix down and right, Phoenix down in mid, it should be good for them. But Jengaru immediately punishes Mast for once again stepping a little bit too far forward, playing a little bit too aggressive. Oddly enough, Dimes, beads available, as pointed out here by production. Good shout out from Rosie there. Mast could have potentially lived through that engagement if he's willing to pop those temporal beads and get a dash on out of there, but instead, because the Kaolin Wardens lose Mast, they don't want to risk anything 35 minutes into this one, considering the fact that they do still have Fire Giant on quite a few members. Just going to back up here and try to go for another siege once they've got everybody available. But honestly, Dimes, with the way that the Sages have been playing, not really sure how easy breaking this base a second time is going to be.
I mean, Fire Giant falling off sooner rather than later might be worth it to just wait for the next respawn of the enhanced Fire Giant and either take a fight in the Fire Well or... I mean, the Kaolin Wardens, what is their ticket in? The base defense from the Sages has been so clean thus far. Phoenixes do continually fall down, but not able to just find that final solid push are the Wardens. What's their ticket? What's the way they punch their card to the first week victory here?
Well, they're very fortunate in the fact that they've already done most of the hard work already. Right Bird still still down due to respawn fairly soon, as well as the middle bird still got about half that respawn timer left available. With those fire waves in right and mid, it makes it a little bit easier, but you're gonna have to be careful here. They've got Jengaru playing very deep behind them, Doesn't seem to have been spotted out just yet. Kaolin Wardens are playing very trepidatiously, but realistically, if they can get a clean engagement off here, Dimes, if they can successfully set up this siege, they could go for the end call, and it looks like Gino is actually going to be trying to find a two disguise, but it doesn't look like they even know that there's a ward there.
Jangaru wrapping around. Relentless One is certainly not the target here. Right lane, Bird back online. And the Athenian Sages looking for someone to step forward. Snatty off the mark there with the Earthbreaker. I mean, a pick would go
crazy.
Miles, would go
Bonkers.
leagues for the Athenian Sages to immediately find their way back into this game. We've reached the point where 37 minutes in, gold and XP negligible at this point. Everyone approaching or at full build. Fire Giant going down here. Athenian Sages not even close. And now maybe the Athenian Sages actually a little too far extended. As Relentless One is charging in, finds a three-man knockup, and Mast in the backline crashing down onto the remaining members of the Sages. Panda Cat finds another one, already 2 key members down and knockup. And there it is, the Athenian Sages falling member by member by member. Snatty goes down, and only Privative, the Geb, with no Cataclysm online to make this base defense work, and it is just not going to happen. The Kaolin Wardens take Fire Giant, they take the lives of the Sages, and they take down the Titan for a Game 3 victory.
And they play it so well there at the end. The Sages, you know, you got to give them credit where it's due. Their defenses on those sieges were phenomenal. They put up a solid wall in front of the enemy team and just prevented them from really breaking in very substantially at all. But they finally chased a little bit too far forward into the jungle. They did not want to give up that enhanced Fire Giant buff a second time around. Didn't think that they could necessarily mount the same successful, miraculous, in fact, sieges, or excuse me, defenses that they did earlier on, and they just get yanked a little bit too far forward. Everybody just too far forward into the jungle, can't really escape, no to the skies available for them, so the chase down was just amazing. It was all that they needed, and like you said, priority targets went down. That was all she wrote.
From the trajectories of games 1 and 2, I was almost certain it was going to be somebody stepping forward, stepping out of line that was going to lead to either a win or a loss for the Kaolin Wardens, but the entire team, the Athenian Sages, stepping forward a little bit too far forward, chasing a Fire Giant that was never going to go their way. I wouldn't have drawn that one up in a million years. I thought the Sages were a little bit more disciplined than that, but just one step too far forward as a team, and Relentless One charges in. Mast finds the back line. Panda Cat comes through with the crushing wave, and that is I was going to say a clean W, but I'll call it a hard-fought W for the Kaolin Wardens, and they're going to progress to 2-1 here this evening and find their first victory in the SEC.
And as we zoom out a little bit, as you say there, this is week number 1. This is absolutely something that if you're a fellow SCCNA team and you're watching this set, you need to be taking notes on the way that the Kaolin Wardens have been playing this map, because it is aggression from the word go. Clearly Panda Cat bringing some of that previous Jade Dragons playstyle with him, because they were aggressive early on. They were proactive. They were in the jungle. They were looking for trouble. And you need to be willing and able to respond to that if you're going to be the one seeing them going into this week number 2. Very strong performance from the Wardens, and the Sages, some bright spots as well. They played the early game of both of those first 2 games incredibly well, but just didn't manage to translate it into anything meaningful. The siege defenses were good from them. The early farming part of the map and transferring into the middle game was pretty good, but going to have to work on cleaning up that transition into the late game.
Well, Kaizo, with that 2-1 victory for the Wardens, that's going to bring week 1 to a close here for the SMITE Challenger Circuit. It's been a great slate of games this week, and week 1 in the books, only 4 more weeks to go. So it's pedal to the metal for all of these SCC squads. You're going to want to watch every single set. That's going to come back on Friday before the SPL, before and after every SPL match. So make sure to tune in prior to the SPL and after for more SCC action. For myself, Dimes, for Kaizo, for our wonderful spectator and Rosie, for production and everyone here, thank you so much for joining us for the SCC in North America, and we'll catch you next time on Friday. Stay hydrated.